Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're hitting the haunted highways of Texas, where the road stretch longer than your nerves, and the next gas station might just be your last stop. From silent hitchhikers who vanish without a trace to gas, stations that only exist at night, get ready for 20 true Texas road trip. Nightmares that will make you think twice before driving after dark. But before we shift into gear, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing that, they miss out on the creepiest, most bone-chilling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear isn't just folklore. It's what's still hiding on the back roads of Texas. Now, I've got to ask, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments below, because out here, once the sun sets, the real nightmare begins. Now buckle up, and let's ride into the darkness. They hadn't expected rain, not in West Texas, not in July, but the sky opened up halfway between Azona and Fort Stockton, spilling something more like sleet than summer rain. The road steamed and hissed like a wet skillet. It came fast, heavy, and mean, and it brought with it a darkness that swallowed the highway whole. Kyle was driving. Cassie sat beside him, staring out the passenger window. Their rental car, a navy blue Toyota Corolla that already smelled like someone else's wet socks, hugged the road shakily, its wipers clapping like a metronome trying to keep up with a song played too fast. It had been quiet for the last 20 minutes, no music, no phone signal. Just the sound of tires slicing through water and the occasional gust of wind rattling the side. Mirrors. They were arguing earlier. Something stupid about the route. Whether they should have taken I-10. Straight through or veered off through Marathon for the scenic detour. Cassie had insisted they stick to the main roads. Kyle, trying to impress her with some cowboy wanderlust he didn't really own, pushed for the long way. They ended up compromising, which, in their case, meant Kyle pretended to agree and then turned off the GPS when she wasn't looking. Now they were lost in the black, in a storm that didn't belong here. That's when they saw her dot at first. She looked like a road worker or someone walking to a stalled car. Just a shape on the shoulder, maybe 100 feet behind them, yellow. Slicker gleaming under the flash of taillights. Her head was down. Hair, dark and stringy, stuck out under the edge of her hood, plastered to her face by the rain. Cassie turned slightly to look through the back window and said, "Did you see that woman?" Kyle didn't answer right away. His hands were clenched tight on the wheel. "Yeah," he finally muttered. "Weird. Out here in the middle of nothing?" Cassie craned her neck again. "Should we stop? She's walking. Probably waiting for someone. I'm not pulling over in this crap." They didn't see any car on the shoulder. No hazard lights. No bags. Nothing but endless scrubland and blacktop soaked in silver. They drove on. 5 minutes later, Cassie glanced back again and hissed sharply through her teeth. "Kyle?" He looked. She was still there. Same yellow raincoat. Same bowed head. Still walking. But the odd thing was, she hadn't gotten any smaller. In fact, if anything, she looked closer. Closer than she had any right to be. Kyle's grip on the wheel tightened again. "Okay, that's not possible, right?" Cassie turned to face forward, her voice a whisper now. "You're going 70. Kyle didn't reply. The wipers squealed. The road bent slightly, curving west toward a long stretch of open plain. The rain didn't let up. Neither did the dark. There were no headlights behind them, no other cars. Just the lonely slap of tires and the growing sensation that something was very wrong. He risked a glance at the rear view. Nothing but steam and blur. But when Cassie turned back again, she recoiled like she'd touched something hot. She's still there. This time Kyle believed her. They hit 80, then 90. The road blurred beneath them, trees and mile markers whipping past in flashes. The speedometer climbed. The tires sang. But she never got smaller. Always the same distance behind 10 car lengths maybe. Always just visible enough to be real, but too far to make out her face. Cassie started crying softly. Not hysterical. Just a slow, helpless weeping like someone trying not to admit they're afraid. Kyle reached over once to grab her hand, but she flinched. "Don't," she said. "Just drive." They passed a sign for Fort Stockton. 27 miles. Then another one. 27 miles again. Kyle cursed and hit the dash. That's not right. That's not, but he cut himself off. Something hit the rear of the car. Not a crash. A tap. A gentle thump, like someone brushing the trunk with their hand. Cassie screamed. Kyle swerved hard enough to fishtail, the tires slipping in the slick. When they steadied, he floored it, pushing past 95. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to look, but he did. And she was closer, now just 2 car lengths back. He could see her hand, pale, limp at her side, and the frayed edges of the yellow coat. Her head still hung forward, and she wasn't walking anymore. She was gliding, smooth, unnatural. Her feet never touched the pavement. What does? "She want?" Cassie whispered. Kyle didn't answer. He didn't have anything left to say. He could barely breathe. Then the radio crackled. They hadn't touched it. It had been off since Del Rio, but now, through the static, a voice came through. Soft, wet-sounding, feminine. "Stop the car." Cassie grabbed the dial and yanked it off, but the voice continued, low and worming through the speakers. "Stop the car. Shut it off, shut it off, shut it off," Cassie sobbed, pounding the dashboard. Kyle twisted the knob until it snapped in his hand. The voice didn't stop. "Stop the car. Let me in. You saw me." Kyle didn't remember the rest of the drive, not really. It blurred. Trees, lights, maybe a gas station, maybe a deer or two. At some point, the rain stopped. The sky lifted, just a little, and the voice faded. When they pulled into a Love's Travel stop on the outskirts of Fort Stockton, the lot was almost empty. Kyle rolled the car into a space, turned off the ignition, and stared ahead for a long time. Cassie was shivering, arms wrapped around herself. He finally turned and looked at the back seat. It was dry, untouched, empty. But on the rear window, from the inside, were 5 long streaks. Like someone dragging their hand down the glass. Cassie refused to stay in the car after that. She sat on the curb outside the convenience store, still shaking, still pale. Kyle walked the perimeter of the lot 3 times, checking for footprints, for shadows, for anything. The clerk inside didn't believe them, or maybe he'd heard something like it before. Either way, he didn't say much, just pointed to the coffee and muttered, "Storm's been bad tonight." Things get strange sometimes. Cassie wouldn't talk for the rest of the night. Not until they got to their motel and locked the door with the chain, the bolt, and a chair propped against the knob. She didn't sleep. Kyle sat on the floor beside the window, staring out into the dark. Watching the shadows dot at 2:43 a.m., the fire alarm in the hallway went off. When Kyle stepped out to check, there was a wet footprint on their welcome mat. He never saw her again. But every now and then, usually in rain, usually when driving alone on long stretches of road, he thought he saw something in the rear view. A shape. A flash of yellow dot always the same distance behind. The night they got lost near Brackettville had started like any other. Friday road trip through Texas, mild arguments about music, a bag of sunflower seeds between them, and the soft hum of tires eating highway under a honey-colored sky. Jared was at the wheel, sunglasses perched on his nose, glancing occasionally at the GPS on his dash. Carrie had kicked off her boots hours ago and had her feet on the dashboard, her fingers scrolling through her phone as if trying to pull signal from thin air. They were heading east toward Uvalde after visiting her aunt's place out in Langtree. Desert country, mostly quiet, mostly empty. But not that night. The GPS voice said to take the next right toward East 90. Jared obliged, signaling and turning as instructed. The sign just before the turn said WEST 90, but Carrie barely looked up. "You sure that's the right way?" she asked. "GPS says so. That says west." "I know, but it recalculated 3 times already. I think it's just being weird with these old roads." "Yeah." "Weird," she muttered, her voice trailing off. The sun dipped below the hills, leaving behind only an orange smear. Twilight settled in with a hush, and the landscape lost its warmth. They drove in silence for a while, watching mile markers tick by. But after maybe 20 minutes, the air turned thick and electric. Jared squinted as a familiar shape came into view. It was the same rest stop they had passed nearly 30 minutes earlier. Run down with a collapsed picnic shelter, overflowing trash bins, and a lone broken payphone standing like a relic from another time. Jared slowed as they passed it. "No way," Carrie said, sitting up. Did we loop?" "Can't be," Jared said. "I never turned around. We've been going straight." But the rest stop didn't just look similar, it was identical. Same graffiti on the bench. Same blue tarp half buried under dirt. Same payphone hanging from its cord, the receiver swinging slightly like someone had just walked off mid-call. Then it rang, just one sharp, piercing chime that cut through the air. Jared hit the gas instinctively. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. The GPS refreshed. A new route. Again, it told them to take the next right. Again, the highway sign read West 90. "Okay, I saw it that time," Jared admitted, his knuckles tight around the steering wheel. "That's west again. The GPS says east." Carrie glanced behind them. "How are we going in circles without turning around?" The GPS didn't seem broken. It updated in real time, tracking their speed and distance correctly. But the map had them moving east when every road sign they passed said they were heading west. What if the signs are wrong? Jared offered, grasping at logic. "Every single one?" They passed the rest stop again. Jared didn't slow this time. But as they came around a curve, something new appeared. Up ahead, standing at the shoulder near the trees, was a man in a beige uniform. Looked like a highway patrol officer at first. He was holding something reflective, maybe a sign. "Finally," Jared said. He slowed and pulled over. The figure didn't move. The car coasted to a stop beside him. Jared rolled the window down halfway. "Hey there. We're a little turned around. Our GPS says one thing, but the signs," the man didn't speak. He didn't. "Look up." The sign he held wasn't official, it was hand-painted wood, maybe something from a protest or homemade warning. The lettering was crude, uneven, but clear. "Go back." Jared blinked. "You okay, man?" The man looked up finally. His eyes were wrong milky, glazed like cataracts or worse. He didn't blink. "Just raise the sign higher. Go back." Carrie whispered, "We're not stopping again." Jared put the car in gear and rolled past. The man didn't follow, didn't move at all. They turned again, blindly obeying the GPS even though every bone in Jared's body told him it was wrong. The road narrowed, trees got closer. And soon? The radio hissed. Static. Carrie turned the dial, but every station was nothing but hiss or distant echoing voices. Then the dashboard screen glitched. The GPS map warped, roads bent, names melted. It froze, then updated again. Next turn, in 0.2 miles. Dude, this thing's messed up, Jared said, reaching for the dash to shut it off. They turned again. And again, the rest stop loomed ahead. The payphone rang before they even reached it this time. Carrie covered her ears. Jared's hands trembled on the wheel. They passed it. Another loop. Another wrong sign. I'm pulling over, he said, breath catching. Something's not right. I need to check the tires or something. He stopped. The car on a patch of gravel. They got out, stretched legs, breathed in the warm, dusty air that suddenly smelled like wet copper. The trees nearby were tall and too still, like they were holding their breath. The payphone rang again, but they were miles away from it now. They turned slowly. There, a few dozen yards into the woods, was another payphone. Just standing in the trees, cord dangling, receiver off the hook. And ringing. What the hell is going on? Carrie whispered. Jared walked toward it as if pulled. Don't, she called after him, but he didn't stop. He reached the phone and touched the receiver. The moment he did, the ringing stopped. He didn't lift it, just held the metal body. He turned to Carrie. There's no wire, no power line. Carrie's voice cracked. Get away from it. He dropped it and stepped back. But now there were more signs around them, wooden planks nailed into trees. They hadn't been there before. They were all hand-painted, some in red, some in black. You shouldn't be here. It doesn't like new people. Don't trust the map. Stop before IT remembers. Carrie began crying. She didn't know when she had started, but it poured out of her chest like she'd been holding it too long. We have to go. Now. They ran to the car, locked the doors. Jared floored it, ignoring the GPS, ignoring the road signs. He turned. The wheel in the opposite direction of what anything suggested. They drove blind. No music. No map. Just instinct and a growing dread that the landscape was folding in on itself. At some point, the trees stopped and gave way to a wide field under a moonless sky. And ahead, finally, was a different building. A diner. Lit. Neon buzzing. Open all night, stuttered in pink and blue. They pulled in. The sign above the door said Loop's Diner. They stumbled in. The place was warm, with clattering dishes and a TV in the corner playing something from the 80s. A waitress behind the counter looked up and smiled. Rough drive? She asked. Carrie nodded, still shaking. The waitress poured 2 coffees and slid them over. Y'all aren't the first to get stuck. That road's tricky after dark. Jared leaned in. What road is this? She gave a strange little smile. The one you weren't supposed to take. They drank the coffee. It helped a little. Jared's phone vibrated. He looked down. The GPS app was still open, frozen. Screen just displayed one message now. You left the loop, but still looking. They didn't stay long. The waitress warned them not to take the same road back. Gave them directions scribbled on a napkin, underlined and starred. Only works once, she said. Don't look back no matter what. They followed her instructions, and just before the turn that would have taken them back into that loop, Jared saw the highway sign twist. Not fall. Twist. Like the metal bent on its own. Like it was correcting itself too late. Carrie closed her eyes. Jared drove on. They never spoke of it again. But even years later, he'd hear it sometimes when the radio went to static too long, the faint, tinny ringing of a payphone. And sometimes, on long night drives, the GPS would glitch and whisper the name of a road he never remembered passing. East 90, near Bracketville, where the signs don't always mean what they say. And something old waits in the loop, hungry for the ones who don't read them in time. There's a stretch of Highway 83 that cuts through nothing but brushland, the kind that goes quiet at night like it's hiding something. It was late August when Darren was driving north through that stretch, somewhere between Rio Grande City and Zapata, heading back to Laredo after a long, pointless meeting. The clock on his dash flicked to 11:17 p.m. and the only thing on the radio was fuzz and distant Spanish gospel. He wasn't tired exactly, but the road had that hypnotic pull, where the yellow lines blur into one long thread and the dark seems to lean in closer the longer you're out there. That's when he saw the kid dot just a little figure at first, standing on the shoulder where the weeds turned to gravel. Darren didn't even believe it at first. You don't expect to see kids out on these roads, not this far out, and definitely not this late. But as his headlights swept over the boy, he saw him clearly, a pale face, dark mop of hair, maybe 10 years old. He wore a red t-shirt, dirty jeans, and no shoes. Just standing there with his thumb out like something from an old hitchhiker's cartoon. Darren drove past him. Before it even registered Dot, he should have kept going. But something pulled at his gut, something more than guilt. Maybe it was the way the boy hadn't moved a muscle as the car passed, hadn't even flinched from the glare. Maybe it was the empty stretch behind him. No towns for miles, no cars, no lights Dot, so Darren slowed. He checked his rear view. The boy was still standing there, facing him now, like he knew Darren would stop. He backed up about 50 yards, gravel crunching under his tires, and rolled down the passenger window. "You okay, kid?" he asked Dot. The boy nodded. "I got lost. My parents' car broke down. They went to find help." Darren looked at the brush. Behind the boy, the endless flat scrub stretching out into blackness. There was no car, no sign of tire tracks, no flashlight in the distance. Just that weird stillness pressing in from the trees. His better sense told him to keep going, but his mouth said, "Get in. I'll take you to the next gas station." The kid opened the door. Darren didn't unlock it, it just clicked on its own. The boy climbed in without a word. Sat stiff, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. "You got a name?" Darren asked. The kid didn't answer. "You sure your folks didn't leave? A note or anything? You don't have a phone?" The boy turned his head, slowly. That's when Darren saw it, his eyes. Not red or glowing or anything from some dumb ghost movie. Just too wide. Too glassy. Like he was looking at you, but not into you. And he didn't blink. Not once. "They didn't left me," the boy said. His voice was flat. Not scared. Not sad. Just wrong. Like a sound that didn't belong in a body that small. Darren felt a chill crawl across his chest, like someone had dragged a cold finger under his collarbone. He gripped the wheel tighter. "You mean they left you?" He corrected. "They didn't." "Left me," the boy repeated. "They tried. But the road doesn't end. Not really." Darren glanced at the kid, then back to the road. He turned up the radio just to break the silence. Static again. He flipped the dial. Nothing. Not even a pop station. "You live around here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I used to." "When was that?" The boy didn't answer. Just turned to stare out the window. Darren's stomach twisted. A few miles later, the car began acting funny. The engine made a soft choking sound. The dashboard lights dimmed for a second. He tapped the brake. It felt stiff, almost like the car didn't want to stop. He checked his mirrors. Empty road behind him. Nothing in front but the blur of highway stretching into dark. "You okay?" he asked again, looking toward the boy. The passenger seat was empty. Darren slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a halt in the middle of the highway. The boy was gone, but the door hadn't opened. The lock hadn't clicked. The seatbelt was still fastened, twisted strangely across the seat. Darren looked around wildly, got out of the car, stepped into the humid night. Cicadas buzzed in the brush, but there were no crickets, no birds. The kind of silence that only comes when everything's watching you. And then, a sound behind him. He turned. The boy stood at the edge of the road again, right where Darren had picked him up. Same red shirt, same empty stare, hands at his sides. Like none of it had happened, Darren's blood turned to ice. He backed toward the car. "Kid," he said, voice trembling. "What? What is this?" The boy's mouth moved. "They always come back," he said. "It's the road. It wants you." 2. Darren jumped in the car, slammed the door, hit the gas. The engine revved, but the car didn't move. The radio turned on by itself. A voice whispered through the speakers, not a song, not a broadcast, just a whisper, low and hissing. "You picked him up. You can't put him down. The locks snapped shut. The windows fogged from the inside. The air grew thick, humid like swamp breath, like something was sitting in the backseat breathing heavy. Darren didn't look. Couldn't. The boy's voice came again, soft, right by his ear. "They said I'd be safe. But I wasn't. They left. You won't." Darren screamed, reached for the door, tried kicking out the window, but the car stayed. Still, the doors wouldn't budge, and outside, the world looked like it was melting road wavering like a mirage. Trees bending inward, the moonlight spinning in dizzy loops, and then everything went black. When he woke up, it was morning. His car was parked neatly on the side of Highway 83, the driver's door open. Birds chirping in the brush, but the engine was dead. His phone had no signal. And on the dashboard, in a pile of dust, was a tiny handprint. Later that day, a trucker would spot Darren walking barefoot along the shoulder, mumbling about a boy, with no parents and a voice that never blinked. The trucker told the cops, who told the locals, who only nodded solemnly. They'd heard it before. Always the same story. Always the same stretch of road. Highway 83 doesn't forgive curiosity. And it never forgets a driver who stops. It was around 10 at night when Morgan and Lucas rolled into the edge of Alpine, low on gas and half delirious from the long haul across West Texas. The desert had a way of bending time, mile after mile of flat blacktop and scrub brush. The moon rising slow and wide like a pale balloon caught in the barbed sky. Lucas was nodding off in the passenger seat, hoodie pulled over his head, earbuds in. Morgan squinted through the windshield, eyes burning, and caught sight of a flickering sign just ahead, almost hidden behind a wind-worn mesquite tree. It read, "Mesa Fuel Stop" in faded red neon. The parking lot was gravel and oil-stained. A single pump stood under a corrugated metal awning, the kind you see in old postcards. It didn't look like much, but beggars couldn't be choosers, not out here. The dashboard needle was kissing. And Morgan's stomach had been growling since Fort Stockton. She pulled in, the tires crunching beneath her, and Lucas stirred. "We here?" he mumbled. "Yeah, weird little place, but it'll do." They stepped out, the night air crisp and dry, cooler than expected. Crickets chirped, loud and echoing, and something about the stillness made her feel watched, not by anyone in particular, just by the land itself. The store was squat, wood-paneled, its windows yellow with age. An old Coke machine stood beside the door, humming faintly. Inside, it was brighter than it should have been, warm, even cozy, like someone tried to make it homey with old signs. A rocking chair and a coffee pot gurgling on the back counter. The floor creaked under their boots. An old man looked up from behind the register. He wore a button-up shirt tucked into jeans, white hair combed straight back. His face was all lines and hollows, his eyes sharp blue, almost too sharp for someone his age. "Y'all come a long way?" he asked, smiling. "Long enough," Morgan said, offering a tired grin. "You got diesel? Pump'll do it." Just hold the trigger down halfway. Don't lock it, or she shut off. Lucas wandered the aisles, grabbing chips, jerky, and a couple of sodas. Morgan followed, brushing dust off a can of iced coffee and watching as Lucas joked about the lack of Wi-Fi bars. The old man didn't say much more, but he watched them polite, curious. Lucas made small talk. Where's he from? Been here long? The old man just nodded toward the back window. Been here as long as the ground's been dry, he said. But don't come back in the daylight. Ain't the same place once the sun's up, Morgan laughed, but it landed awkwardly. Lucas raised a brow, gave a playful, okay, cryptic gas station guy, and handed him the bills. They fueled up, munched on snacks in the car, and drove off toward their campsite at a little pull-off, west of Alpine. Morgan glanced in the rearview once, catching the gas station in her mirrors. The lights flickered again, like they had when they first saw it. She shrugged it off. The next morning, they decided to drive back into town for breakfast. Lucas joked. They should grab another bottle of that weird horchata soda from the station. But when they turned down the same two-lane road, passing the same crooked mesquite tree, they found nothing. The clearing was still there. The gravel lot? Gone. The pump? Gone. The building? Nothing but a blackened foundation. Choked with weeds and broken glass. Morgan killed the engine, both of them staring. No way, Lucas muttered. No way this is the same place. That's not even this is like ruins. That building's been gone forever. They stepped out. Morgan crouched near the soot-black slab, running a hand over the brittle wood charred to ash. It felt cold. Too cold. She looked up at Lucas, who stood over what was once the Coke machine, now just a rusted husk covered in vines. They walked in silence through the ghost of the store. Where the counter had been was a collapsed beam. The rocking chair was nothing but a frame. But even in that ruin, they both swore they heard the soft groan of it creaking, and the air smelled faintly, just faintly, of hot coffee. Lucas picked up a twisted piece of metal, the shape of it vaguely familiar. He turned it over in his hands. Silent. We talked to him, Morgan whispered. He was real. He smiled. I remember his eyes. They stood for a while, unsure of what to do. Eventually, they took photos. But when they got back to the motel that night, every image was blank, just static blur, like a dirty lens or an old TV between channels. Over the next few weeks, Morgan became obsessed. She searched local archives, old maps, even Reddit threads. And she found a Mesa fuel stop burned down in 1987. 2 teens died trying to break in during the night. The clerk, an older man, white hair, blue eyes, had gone missing. Never found. Some said he ran. Others said he went with the flames. But there were stories stretching back decades. People seeing it again. Just once. Just at night. Locals wouldn't talk about it directly. But one message from a user named Desert Watcher 99 stuck with her. If you see it again, don't stop. Not twice. First visit's a fluke. Second one's permanent. Morgan deleted her account that night. They never took that. Rode again. Never even drove past Alpine. Something about that night stayed in their bones, something about the way that old man had smiled, like he knew they'd be back. And sometimes, late at night, when Morgan's driving alone down back roads with just the hum of tires for company, she sees flickering red light out of the corner of her eye. She never turns in. Not anymore. The wind was dry and thin and smelled like sun-scorched gravel when Rick and Dana pulled their aging Winnebago into the RV park just outside Van Horn. It was late July, sometime after 8:30 p.m., and the desert heat still clung to the air like a wet towel. They'd driven 6 hours straight from Lubbock, hoping to make it closer to Marfa. But Dana had started getting drowsy and Rick's shoulder was acting up again. So when the GPS flagged a quiet-looking park on the outskirts of town, they took the exit without hesitation. The place didn't look like much, just a long row of parallel RV pads, maybe 12 in total, with hookups that hadn't been replaced since Reagan was president. There was a squat concrete bathhouse near the entrance and a single office trailer with a faded Coca-Cola sign and a rusted mailbox hanging crooked by the door. What was odd, though, was that all the pads were full. Every single one. Campers of all sizes lined both sides of the gravel loop. Big white fifth wheels with extended awnings, squat Class BS, and 2 shiny new Airstreams with Texas plates. Lights were on in nearly every one. You could see them glowing soft behind thin curtains or through the smoked acrylic windows, faint silhouettes moving inside, people standing, crossing rooms, someone sitting at a table in one, a head bobbing in another like someone watching TV. Rick knocked on the office trailer's door, expecting at least a grumpy attendant or a key drop box, but no one answered. The door was locked. The screen door creaked like it hadn't been oiled in years. A handwritten paper taped to the window said, "Self-check-in, pad 11 open, cash in slot. No rates. No phone number." Just that pad 11 was the last one. On the loop, right near the barbed wire fence that separated the RV park from open desert. They parked, connected the power, and decided to walk to the bathhouse. That's when Dana stopped mid-stride and grabbed Rick's arm. "Did you see that?" she asked. He looked up. Across the lot, in the window of a newer Forest River RV, was the shape of a woman. She was facing them completely still, just standing behind the thin mesh of the curtain, watching. Her hands were pressed flat against the window. Then she stepped backward into darkness, the light flicking off a second later. Rick waved at the window anyway, half joking. Guess we're not the only ones stopping for the night. But Dana didn't laugh. They used the bathhouse in silence. It was cleaner than expected, though it smelled faintly of bleach and old water. The fluorescent lights above flickered every few seconds. Rick shaved. Dana brushed her teeth. She thought she heard a voice murmuring in one of the shower stalls. But when she looked, the place was empty except for them. Outside, it was getting darker, the sky now a deep navy with the edges of burnt orange slipping away behind the mountains. Back at their RV, Dana pulled out the wine, trying to lighten the mood. "We needed this stop," she said. "You'll sleep better without pushing your shoulder." Rick nodded but didn't answer. He was watching the silhouette of a man across the gravel lot pacing inside one of the trailers. The movement was rhythmic. Exact. 5 steps to the left, 5 to the right, back and forth, never changing speed. Like a yem etr own aum e. Rick finally spoke. "Something's off here." That night, just after midnight, the knocking began. It was soft at first. Just 3 knocks. Slow. Even. Rick assumed it was a tree branch or maybe the wind playing with one of the loose cables outside. But then came another set. Louder, closer. Knock. Knock. Dana sat up. "Rick. Did you hear that?" He was already halfway out of bed, pulling on his jeans. The knocks moved. This time they came from the back end of the Winnebago, near the bedroom window. Then the passenger side. Then near the side mirror. He grabbed the flashlight and yanked open the door, but there was no one. The other RVs were dark now. Lights off. Every curtain drawn. No movement inside. No pacing man. No woman behind the mesh. It was like the entire park had shut down in unison. Rick walked around the vehicle, shining the beam into the brush, the gravel, the spaces between trailers. Nothing. Then, as he turned toward the Airstream 2 lots down, he saw a figure standing perfectly still between the vehicles. Not moving, not hiding. Just there. Rick raised the flashlight. The beam caught the figure in mid-chest, but the face, if there was one, remained in shadow. The figure didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stood. Rick took a step forward. The figure slowly lifted its arm and pointed at him. Then the light in the airstream flicked on. The figure vanished. Rick ran back inside and locked the door. All night, the knocking returned. Sometimes on the door, sometimes tapping on the glass, sometimes scraping across the roof. At one point, Dana thought she saw fingers drag across the kitchen window, leaving long, wet streaks. But when Rick looked, there was nothing there. Just empty darkness and the sound of dry wind hissing through desert brush. By morning, everything was quiet. The sun was already beating down hard, turning the metal handles too hot to touch. Rick and Dana stepped outside and walked the loop. One more time. Every RV was still there, curtains drawn, doors closed, power cords connected. But there wasn't a single soul in sight, no dogs barking, no smell of breakfast, no sound of TVs or radios. Dana knocked on 3 different doors. No one answered. She tried a fourth, a dusty red fifth wheel with Nevada plates. The door was locked. But she swore she heard breathing behind it, shallow, timed to hers, as if someone or something was mimicking her from the other side. When they reached the office again, Rick tried calling the emergency number on a faded sign near the mailbox. The line was dead, not disconnected, not voicemail. Just a low, constant hum like static and breathing, like someone holding the receiver and refusing to speak. They didn't pack up. They just drove off. 20 miles outside of Van Horn. Dana finally spoke. Her voice was shaking. I saw them. Through the window, when the knocking started, a woman, a man, a kid. They were all inside one of those trailers, just standing there, watching, not blinking. And they were wrong. Wrong how? Rick asked. Dana didn't answer. She just kept staring ahead at the road, at the open Texas horizon that somehow felt too empty, too clean. That night, in the motel they found in Fort Stockton, Rick pulled out his phone and searched for the name of the RV park. He couldn't find it on Google Maps, not even in cached history. The last thing showing was a GPS pin labeled, Rest Area, No Services. He zoomed in on the satellite view. Nothing but empty gravel. No trailers, no loop, no bathhouse. Just the scar of what looked like an old foundation, like something had been there once, but hadn't been in a long, long time. They were 2 hours out of Sanderson when they first noticed the truck. Lena was driving, her hands loose on the steering wheel, her left leg tucked under her right, head cocked to one side like she was listening to the road. Nate was in the passenger seat, chewing sunflower seeds, the floor of the SUV littered with empty bottles and snack wrappers from their week-long detour through Big Bend. It was hot, even after dark, and the road US 90 was just a flat ribbon of asphalt cutting through the nothingness of West Texas. They hadn't passed another car in 20 minutes. The air felt heavy, and the horizon shimmered even though the sun had been gone for hours. It was Nate who saw it first in the mirror. Behind. US, he said. That truck been there a while? Lena checked the mirror. A truck, black or maybe just dust-covered, sat a few car lengths back. No headlights, no grill shine, no license plate plain. Just a dark shape moving exactly as fast as they were. Like it was tethered. Probably a rancher, she said. No lights, trying to save his battery or something. But Nate didn't think so. Something about it felt off. It wasn't weaving. It wasn't gaining. It wasn't falling back. It was just there. He twisted in his seat, watching it. Then he frowned. I don't hear it. Lena cocked her head, rolled down her window. The wind roared in, but underneath. That nothing. No engine growl. No tire hum. She hit the brakes lightly. The truck matched her. She sped up. So did it. Okay, she said slowly. That's weird. The road kept stretching, empty and endless, flanked by mesquite brush and fade and rust-colored hills that looked like they'd been forgotten by time. They passed the occasional sign for ghost towns that hadn't seen life in 50 years. The truck never passed, never left. Always there. When Nate finally picked up his phone, it had no service. No bars, no emergency calls. Try yours. He said. Lena pulled hers out. Same. Just a red cross in the corner and a mocking no signal icon. I don't like this. Nate muttered, eyes locked on the mirror. Lena said nothing. They came up on a stretch of road where the moonlight opened. Up the terrain, revealing the cracked bones of what used to be a small town, a few broken buildings, a gas station with one rusted pump, and a church. The steeple leaned sideways like it was trying to fall, but hadn't quite decided how. Lena blinked. That church. I know, Nate said. I've seen it before. But we never came this way. No, they passed the church. As they did, the truck blinked out. Not faded, not turned off. One moment it was there. The next, it wasn't. Lena slammed the brakes, heart thudding. They stopped in the middle of the road, dust curling around them like breath. Nate turned slowly, scanning the dark horizon. Nothing. No truck. No lights. No sound but the ticking of their cooling engine. Lena put the car in reverse. I'm going. Back? What? Why? I just want to see. She backed up the SUV slowly, wheels crunching gravel. The church reappeared in their headlights. The broken sign out front still read "Rejoice, for he is with us." Every window had been blown out, jagged teeth of glass still clinging to the frames. The front door was open, just a little. Just enough. Don't, Nate said. Lena opened her door. Lena, don't. But she was already stepping out, the dome light spilling yellow onto the cracked pavement. The air outside was strange. Not hot, not cold, just thick. Like it was trying to push her back in. She walked to the church. Dust crunched beneath her shoes. Somewhere behind her, Nate whispered something she didn't catch. She stepped inside. It was empty, or mostly. The pews were all gone, just dark shadows on the floor where they used to be. At the front, the altar had been smashed. Crosses had been yanked from the walls, leaving only nail scars and faded outlines. And yet, someone had lit candles. Dozens of them. Along the back wall, the flickering flames glowed softly, dancing in unison. Lena turned to leave. The door slammed shut behind her. Nate screamed her name from the road. She ran to the door, yanked it. Locked. No dash jammed. Something was holding it. Behind her, the candles snuffed out one by one. She pounded the wood, screamed, kicked. Then a voice whispered behind her ear. Don't go. She spun around. Nothing. The last candle flickered. Then darkness. Nate sprinted from the car, yanking open the church door. It moved easy for him, like it had never been stuck. Lena? She was gone. The candles were gone. Even. The dust was gone. The inside looked untouched, pristine, like it had just been built. White walls. Straight pews. Clean altar. No Lena. No footprints. No sound. He ran through the church screaming for her. Nothing. He searched behind the altar, through the back door, around the side. Nothing. She was just gone. He staggered back to the car, shaking. Turned the key. It wouldn't start. He slammed the wheel. Tried again. The headlights flickered on, then off. Then behind him, a low rumble. He turned. The truck. It was back, right behind him. Closer than before, inches from the bumper, but no driver. No sound, just there. He jumped out of the SUV, ran toward the scrubland. His phone still had no service. He scrambled down a rocky incline, cutting his hands. Looked back. The truck wasn't following Dot, it was just parked, waiting. He waited till sunrise. When he came back, the SUV was gone. So was the church. So was the road. Nothing but desert. Endless, empty desert. They found him 6 days later, barefoot and wandering, along a ranch fence near Del Rio. He couldn't say where he'd been. Couldn't say what happened to Lena. Just kept repeating something over and over. It followed us for 110 miles. It never made a sound. And then, quieter, she opened the door first. They were headed west on I-10, tired and sniping at each other the way couples do when the gas is low. The GPS is being glitchy, and the night's gotten too dark for comfort. Carly had wanted to push through to Fort Stockton. David had insisted they pull off in Sonora for a few hours of sleep. It was nearly 1 a.m. when they rolled off the highway into the quiet little town that looked like it had gone to sleep in the 70s and never woken up. There weren't many choices. One motel had a crooked "no vacancy" sign flickering in the window. Another was shuttered altogether. Then there was the Sunset Inn. The neon vacancy sign buzzed weakly, and one of the O's in the word motel was missing entirely, giving the sign a lopsided grin. David pulled in without a word. Carly didn't argue. She just wanted a bed. The parking lot was gravel, the kind that crunches loud beneath your tires even when you're trying to be quiet. They walked to the office, luggage still in the car, and rang the buzzer beside the locked door. It didn't make a sound, but the door opened almost instantly anyway. The man behind the counter wore a crisp white shirt that looked like it had been ironed right onto his skin. His name tag read Craig, though the plastic was cracked. He smiled, too wide and too fast, like someone had flicked a switch behind his eyes. "Checking in?" he asked, voice oily and polite. David nodded. "Yeah, just one night." "Of course, just the two of you?" His eyes flicked to Carly, and she felt the hairs on her arms rise, even though the room wasn't cold. "Yes," Carly said sharply. "Wonderful," Craig said, then turned and plucked a key from the wall. An actual key, not a card. Room 9, corner unit. Quiet. No windows, but most people find it restful that way. David raised an eyebrow. "No windows?" "Some prefer the privacy," Craig replied. "Especially this late." Carly's skin prickled again. She didn't like how he said "this late," but she was too tired to push. David paid in cash because the man claimed the system was offline for maintenance, and they walked back into the night with the key. Room 9 was around the side of the building, separated from the others by a narrow cement path lined with dead bushes and one flickering light. The key turned smoothly, and the door creaked open. The room smelled like bleach and something faintly sweet. Too sweet, like decaying fruit masked by cleaning fluid. Carly wrinkled her nose. The carpet was worn thin in places, and the bedspread was an aggressive floral pattern that hadn't been fashionable since 1983. The bathroom light buzzed, and as promised, there were no windows. "Creepy," Carly muttered, tossing her bag on the chair. "It's fine," David said, already kicking off his shoes. "We're here for 6 hours. Let's just sleep." That might have been the end of it, but as Carly was brushing her teeth, she heard it. Faint, barely a whisper. A voice through the wall, the one they shared with room 10. At first she thought it was a TV, but there was no rhythm to it, no dialogue. Just a voice, weeping, and words in a language she didn't recognize. "David," she called, toothbrush still in her mouth. "You hear that?" He was lying on the bed scrolling through his phone. "Hear what?" "Next door. Someone's crying." He paused, then listened. There it was again. Louder now, desperate, panicked, and foreign. David sat up. "What the hell is that?" Carly opened the adjoining wall cabinet not a connecting door, just a utility closet, and pressed her ear to it. The voice was clearer there. Not one, but two, maybe three voices. And though she couldn't understand the words, the tone was unmistakable. Pleading, begging. "Should we call someone?" she whispered. David shook his head slowly, frowning. This place doesn't feel right. They both jumped when a thud echoed from room 10, then another, a dragging sound. Then silence. David walked to the door and opened it a crack, peering out into the night. The parking lot was still, not a single car besides theirs. He looked to the room next door. No light beneath the door. No shadows moving. He walked over and knocked. Carly hissed at him from their doorway. "What the hell are you doing?" He knocked again, no answer. But the door, it creaked open slightly, just from the knock. Unlocked. Carly stepped out now, barefoot on the cold concrete. "David," she whispered. "Don't." But he already had. He pushed the door open wider. The room was dark inside. Darker than it should have been. It swallowed the porch light like a black hole. "Hello?" David said. "Is everything okay?" A voice answered. But it didn't come from the room. It came from above them. Carly gasped and looked up just in time to see something. Some shape melt away into the roofline, like it had been watching from the shadows. David saw it too. Just a flicker. A ripple. Like heat off pavement, but in the shape of a person. Wrong. Angular. They both stumbled backward. Then the crying started. Again. This time it was coming from inside their room. Carly turned slowly, staring at their still open door. The light was off. She was sure they hadn't turned it off. But now it was pitch black inside. And from the darkness, the voices came. The same foreign language. Only now louder, layered, as if 10 people were speaking over one another. Chanting, praying, pleading. David slammed the door to room 10 shut and ran to Carly, grabbing her hand. "We're leaving. Now?" But the key. He'd left it on the nightstand. "No time," he said, and yanked open their car door. The car wouldn't start. Not once. Not twice. The dashboard flickered. The radio popped on, but it was just static. Then, beneath the static, the voices again. The same language. Over and over, louder, closer. Carly screamed when she saw the figures at the end of the lot. 4 of them, barefoot, wearing the same clothes, white stained at the hem. Their faces looked human, but stretched somehow, like clay pulled too far, and their mouths never moved, but the voices, they were coming from them. Not speaking, broadcasting. Like radios cranked to full volume inside hollow skulls. David kept trying the ignition. It caught. Once, then stalled. The figures were closer now, 20 feet. Then 10. Finally, the engine roared to life and the headlights burst on. The figures vanished. Not ran, not ducked. Just blinked out of existence like smoke sucked into a vent. They peeled out of the lot, tires throwing gravel. Neither of them spoke until they were 10 miles down the highway. David drove until dawn without stopping. When they finally pulled into a gas station in Fort Stockton, Carly stumbled into the bathroom and splashed water on her face. In the mirror, she saw a smear of something on her cheek. She wiped it off with a paper towel. It was red. Dark. Sticky. She didn't have a cut. David came in after her and held out his phone. "You're not going to believe this," he said, voice shaking. "I tried to find reviews for the Sunset Inn." He showed her the screen. Sunset Inn permanently closed. Last review, 2011. She scrolled down. The last review was short. Room 9 has no windows. Don't check in after midnight. Don't answer the crying next door. We didn't make it out. They had barely passed the last overlook when it started. A scream that didn't sound like any of them, shrill and fast, like it had come from the floor of the back seat. Clay slammed on the brakes for a second and glanced around the car. Karen spun in the passenger seat, her mouth half open, the McDonald's cup in her lap tipping just enough to spill cold soda down her leg. The kids in the back, Lacey and Aaron, were frozen stiff, their phones glowing in their hands. The scream stopped just as quick as it had started. Everyone looked at each other, blinking under the dome light. No one said a word, Clay forced. A laugh. Jesus, one of y'all playing something? But his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone trying too hard to sound casual. Karen wiped her pants with a napkin. Did you hear it too? She said. Tell me you heard that. Lacey, 15 and allergic to conversation, said in a flat voice, it came from under the seat. Aaron, 12, just stared straight ahead and whispered, no one else is here. Clay chuckled again, but there was no smile behind it this time. He put the car back in drive and eased forward. The night swallowed the road ahead, the dark hill country rising and falling like waves of earth. The Devil's Backbone stretched across the ridge behind them, and the road dipped into the deep shadow of the valley now. The radio was off. The air conditioner hummed. No one talked. Then the second scream came. Longer, louder, higher pitched. Not from under the seat this time. From somewhere above them, like it came down through the roof. Karen screamed and slapped the ceiling like it'd do something. Aaron dropped his phone. Lacey clutched hers with white knuckles. Clay jerked the car to the shoulder and turned the engine off. They sat in the dark, the headlights aimed at nothing but a scrubby cedar fence and the endless black behind it. The air inside the SUV was tight, like they were all breathing through the same thin straw. Clay got out slowly. The driver's side. Door groaned too loud in the quiet. Crickets had stopped. Not even a breeze. Just the sound of his boots on the gravel shoulder as he walked around the car. Checking. Y'all stay in there? He said over his shoulder. Just want to check the tires. Lies. He didn't know what he was doing. He just needed to be out of the car for a second, away from that silent, breathless box. He leaned down and ran his hands along the rear wheel well. Cold rubber. Nothing out of place. He looked down the road, both directions. Nobody coming, nobody going. No lights, not even from the ranch houses off in the hills. He was walking back around the car when the third scream hit. But this time, it didn't fade. It stayed. It stayed screaming, not a single voice anymore, but a dozen, maybe more, overlapping, rising and rising, echoing against the glass, clawing through the frame of the SUV. Karen was screaming now too, clutching her ears. Lacey had curled into a ball and Aaron, God help him, was staring out the window, mouthing something Clay couldn't hear. Clay dove into the driver's seat and fumbled to start the engine. His hands were shaking too bad. When the key finally caught, he threw it into gear and floored it, fishtailing out into the black road. The screeching followed. For another 20 seconds, it followed. And then it just stopped. They didn't speak, not for a long time. Karen wiped tears off her cheeks. Lacey kept rocking back and forth. Aaron finally said something. My phone vibrated. Clay swallowed. What? I got a voicemail. His voice sounded like it was underwater. Just now, Clay said nothing. Just kept driving. Karen turned around slowly and reached her hand out, palm up. Let me see. Aaron hesitated, then handed her the phone. She held it like it was something that might bite. One missed call. No number, just unknown. And below it, one new voicemail. Karen looked at Clay. He nodded once. She tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker. The recording was only 6 seconds. First came static. sharp and fast like wind over gravel. Then came the voice. A girl's voice, young, maybe 8 or 9, maybe younger. No accent. Just 5 words. Don't stop next time, please. The voicemail ended. Nobody breathed. Clay's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Delete it, he said. Karen didn't move. Delete it. Now. She did, slowly. Then she dropped the phone on the floor. They passed through Wimberley in dead silence. The glowing sign outside the Baptist church said Jesus saves in missing letters. The gas station on the corner was closed but lit. Clay refused to stop, not for gas, not for water, not even when Aaron said he needed to pee. They didn't stop again until they were pulling into the driveway back in San Antonio just after 1:40 in the morning. The porch light was on, same as always. Dog barked inside. The neighbor's security light flicked on. All of it exactly as they'd left it. Clay sat behind the wheel for a minute while Karen unlocked the door and led the kids inside. He watched their shadows move through the house. Everything looked normal. Except for the voicemail that wasn't there anymore. He opened his phone and tapped into the call log. No missed calls. No voicemail history. Nothing. He checked again. Then again. Still nothing. He stepped out of the car, locked it behind him, and walked slowly to the front door. But something stopped him on the porch. Something small. A shape against the welcome mat. He leaned down and picked it up. A Polaroid. Still warm. In it. The SUV, parked right where they had pulled over on the side of the backbone. And behind it, barely visible in the brush near the cedar fence, was a pale girl with her hands over her ears and blood running from her nose. The caption, scrawled across the bottom, read, "You were supposed to keep driving." He flipped the photo over. The back was blank. Except for one thing, a voicemail icon, scratched in with something sharp, and next to it, a time, 2:13 a.m. He checked his watch. It was 2:07. The phone in his hand vibrated. Once. Then again. Then the screen lit up. Unknown number. .1 new voicemail. They didn't notice the dog the first time. It was just a shadow off the shoulder of the southbound lane. A low shape against the glare of their high beams as they pushed through mile marker 10 outside Laredo. David was fiddling with the radio, still trying to get past the fuzz and static of empty desert frequencies. Sarah had her bare feet up on the dash, her sandals tucked under the seat and her legs glowing faintly in the green backlight of the speedometer. The trip had started 3 hours earlier, long after sundown, and both of them were riding the giddy edge between road hypnosis and sugar-fueled delirium. They didn't see the dog, not really, but it saw them. By mile marker 20. It was undeniable. There it was again. Same black shape, same rigid posture. Sitting still beside the green sign, not panting, not shifting. Just watching as they passed. "Did you see that?" Sarah asked. David looked up too late, caught only the blur of the next reflector. "What?" "That dog," she said. "It was just sitting there," he shrugged. "Probably waiting for someone. You know how strays follow cars out here." She frowned. It looked the same as the one back at the last marker. "You're tired." But at mile marker 30, the same shape sat again. This time, David saw it. Neither of them said anything for a while. The road stretched forward like a slow, unspooling thread of darkness, the yellow line stuttering under the van's wheels. The only sound was the muted thrum of tires and a soft rattle from the passenger side window that wouldn't seal properly. Mile 40. The dog. Sarah sat up straighter. "That's not possible." David gripped the wheel a little tighter. "It's gotta be a coincidence. Same size, same exact spot, same way it's sitting. We're probably imagining it." Sarah turned in her seat, twisted around to look out the back. The rear lights illuminated only blacktop and mesquite. No sign of the dog. It was never there when they looked back. Let's stop next time. No. What if it's hurt? Or someone trained it and dumped it? No. They didn't talk for the next 10 miles. Mile 50. The dog sat again, same position, same watching eyes. This time, Sarah reached for the door handle, and David locked the doors without looking at her. "You're scaring me," she said. "That's not a dog." "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, adjusting his grip, "dogs don't sit like statues every 10 miles down a highway and vanish when you turn around." They hit a rough patch, the van jolting over potholes and gravel. For a few seconds, everything rattled. When they reached mile marker 60, the dog wasn't sitting. It was standing. In the middle of the road. David swerved so fast the tires screamed and the van rocked sideways. For a moment, all they saw was motion. Sarah's phone flying off her lap, her feet hitting the floor, a blur of black fur just outside the windshield, and then it was gone. No thump, no yelp, no impact. They pulled over, heartbeats ragged, engine idling, headlights aimed down an empty stretch of road. No dog, no blood, no tracks, just the distant howl of wind weaving through the brush. "I swear we almost hit it," David whispered. "I know." They sat for a minute, then Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and slowly opened the door. "Don't," David said sharply. "I just want to check." She stepped out before he could stop her, sandals crunching gravel, hair lifting in the warm desert breeze. She walked past the front of the van, squinting into the dark, the twin beams of the headlights slicing the night into narrow corridors of white and shadow. "There's nothing," her voice cut off. David opened his door, heart pounding, and circled the van. Sarah stood motionless. "What?" he asked. She pointed. There, right behind the highway sign, was a fresh animal carcass. Not dog. Not deer. Something wrong with it. Bloated. Skinned in patches. Flies swarming. The smell rolled over them a second later. David grabbed her arm. "Get in, now." Back on the road, they didn't speak. Just mile after mile of silence. Headlights glancing off sagebrush and flickering signs. At mile 70, the dog sat again. Closer to the edge of the road this time. Sarah started crying quietly. David pressed the gas pedal harder. It didn't matter. At mile 80, it was closer. At mile 90, it had moved off his shoulder and sat directly beneath the sign, almost touching it. And then, at mile 100, it was gone. The sign stood empty. No watching eyes. No black fur. No presence. They exhaled at the same time. David slowed slightly. Sarah wiped her eyes and tried to laugh. "Maybe we imagined it." "Yeah," he said. "Maybe." Then something thumped on the roof. Just once, like a sack of meat dropped from a height. Then another thump, then scraping. David screamed and slammed on the brakes. The van fishtailed slightly but stopped on the shoulder. The roof went quiet. Sarah was already fumbling for her phone. David climbed halfway out of the driver's window, hands shaking, heart roaring in his ears. Nothing. Then he turned to look behind. A row of fresh claw marks trailed from the middle of the roof to the back door. 5 parallel lines. Deep through the paint. "Get back in," Sarah yelled. They took off again. This time pushing past 80, past 90. Laredo was only 30 miles out, but every minute felt longer. Mile 110. The dog was lying in the road, not sitting, not standing, just lying there, like it had been run over. But there was no blood, no wounds. Its eyes followed them as they passed. They didn't slow. Mile 120. The dog stood again, but it wasn't a dog anymore. It had lengthened. Too tall, legs too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle, mouth slightly open, revealing too many teeth. The fur was patchy, like it had been burned. It was still watching, and it wasn't blinking. Sarah whispered, "What does it want?" David said nothing. At mile 130, the sign had no number, just a smear of black, like it had melted. And the thing was sitting next to it, waiting. They never stopped again. Not for gas, not for food, not even when they saw a flashing patrol car miles ahead. They made it to Laredo just past 3 a.m. The lights of the city didn't help. The streets were empty. The motel clerk had one lazy eye and gave them a room key without saying a word. Inside the room, David pulled the curtains tight. Sarah went to the bathroom and didn't come out for 10 minutes. When she did, she was pale. "There's mud on the window," she said. They left before dawn, drove back the way they came, swearing to take the interstate instead. And every 10 miles, like clockwork, something watched them go. The gas station was an old one, the kind you didn't see much anymore unless you strayed from the main roads and wandered into the skeleton ribs of towns that hadn't breathed new life in decades. Llano had those ribs, cracked and brittle, stretched across 2 lanes of heat-shimmering blacktop and memories that never made it past the city limits. Danny and Mel weren't from Llano. They were passing through Austin to Marfa, a last-minute road trip to chase sunsets and escape the noise of real life. They weren't even supposed to stop in town, but the gas light blinked orange just past the county line, and there was only one place open after 10. The station didn't have a name, just a flickering open sign that barely glowed in the fade in the yellowed window beside the door. There were 2 pumps, one of them duct-taped at the base, the hose coiled like a dead snake. The other one looked almost too clean, too shiny against the dusty backdrop of the lot. Danny pulled up to it and stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots. The air smelled like dirt, hot rubber, and something else, something metallic. And old. He slid his card in, the screen blinked once, then read, "Ready to pump." Mel stayed in the car, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone and laughing softly to herself. Danny lifted the nozzle, clicked it into the tank, and squeezed. The gas rushed out with a low hum like any other fill-up. He leaned against the back of the car, eyes drifting to the station window. There was a man inside, thin, maybe in his 60s, long gray beard. He was staring right at Danny. Danny looked away, uncomfortable. A minute passed, then another. The pump didn't click. He glanced at the display. $45, 58, 72. His heart skipped a little, and he grabbed the handle to stop it, but it wouldn't budge. He yanked harder, twisting it, slamming the trigger off, but the gas kept flowing, spilling out the side of the car and onto the concrete. A sharp smell filled the air, thick and suffocating. He cursed and reached to pull the nozzle from the car entirely. It wouldn't move. It was stuck like it had fused to the metal. Gasoline dripped down his jeans. He kicked at the hose, tried to force it free with both hands, teeth clenched. It hissed like a snake as more fuel surged out, pooling in a widening slick around his boots. Mel opened the door, calling his name, but he was too locked in, muscles straining against something that should have given way but didn't. The numbers on the pump screen shot past. 100, 130, 160. It kept going. Danny finally screamed in frustration and pulled with everything he had. The nozzle ripped loose and gas sprayed out in a wide arc, coating his arm, his side, the car. He staggered back, coughing, eyes burning. Mel was out now, panicked, rushing to him. But before they could even react, the front door of the station slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the window glass. The man inside twisted the lock and slammed both palms against the door. "Don't leave." He screamed, his voice muffled through the old greasy glass. "Don't you drive off." Danny wiped his eyes, chest heaving. What the hell is wrong with this thing? He shouted, motioning to the pump. The gas had finally stopped, but the hose was twitching on the ground, leaking in small rhythmic bursts, like it still wanted to feed something. The man behind the glass was shaking his head violently, sweat gleaming on his forehead. "Get away from the car," he mouthed. "Back away. Now." Mel looked between him and the car. "We have to go," she said, gripping Danny's arm. "We'll call the fire department or something. He's probably insane." The clerk ran to the window, slapped the side of it with his palm, and pointed behind them. That's when they heard it. A slow, slurping sound, like something drinking. They turned. The puddle of gasoline had begun to shift, not just spreading, but pulling inward, flowing against gravity, up the side of the pump, up into the hose again, into the metal casing like it was being sucked back in. Mel took a step back. Danny froze. The hose twitched and jerked, then the pump began to hum, not mechanically. It sounded like breathing. They both backed away slowly, the air buzzing with the sharp chemical scent of fuel and something deeper rotten. Sweet like old blood under floorboards. The clerk was at the door again. This time he was whispering something. They leaned closer. Through the grimy glass, it looked like he was saying, "It knows now." Danny pushed on the glass. "Let us in." The clerk didn't unlock the door. He just stared at them, eyes wide with something between pity and terror. Then he pointed at the car. Not at the car. Inside it. Mel screamed. There was someone in the driver's seat. A figure, sitting calmly, hands on the wheel. Black suit, black hat. Pale face turned toward them with eyes that didn't blink. Not once. Danny ran to the door, yanking the handle. Locked. The figure didn't move. Gasoline bubbled in the puddle again, but this time it was thicker, darker, something between oil and blood. It pulsed like a heartbeat, forming tendrils that snaked across the lot, inching toward their feet. Inside the station, the lights flickered. The clerk had disappeared from view. The entire interior looked darker now. Too dark, like it wasn't. Night outside, it was night in there. Danny grabbed Mel's wrist and yanked her toward the road. Away from the car, away from the pump. They sprinted, feet slipping on the oily concrete, lungs stinging. Behind them, the car engine roared to life. But the lights didn't come on, and the tires didn't squeal. Just hovered in sound. They didn't look back, not when the horn started blaring in a long, low tone that stretched out like a dying breath. Not when the voice came through the air, mechanical, cold, but too deep to be human. More, it said. They ran all the way to the edge of town, where a lone diner stayed open for truckers and drunks. Called the sheriff, called the fire department, called anyone who would listen. But when the authorities got there an hour later, the station was gone. Not closed. Gone. Just a slab of cracked pavement where the building should have been. A single burnt gas pump still standing upright like a grave marker. Their car was never found. Neither was the clerk. They questioned Danny and Mel for hours, accused them of drugs, mental breakdowns, anything that would make sense on paper. But nothing ever did. A week later, a trucker headed north from Mason stopped to fill up at a new station just outside Llano. He slid his card into the reader. It blinked, buzzed, and read, "Ready to pump." The nozzle clicked. The gas started flowing and didn't stop. They were almost past the bend in the road when Caleb saw her sitting there on the rust-bitten guardrail just before the incline curved up toward the western ridge of the Davis Mountains. The headlights of the old Toyota Tacoma washed her in. A bluish hue, catching the shimmer of something white, her dress, he thought, or maybe her skin. Bare feet dangled over the side, ankles swinging like a child waiting for a ride home from Sunday school. She wasn't looking at them. She was staring out over the mountain basin, lips moving in some silent chant or prayer or something else. Caleb tapped the brakes and the truck slowed to a crawl. Do you see that? Mara, sitting in the passenger seat with her hoodie pulled tight around her face, leaned forward. What the hell is she doing out here? Could be hurt. At midnight? On a mountain highway? Her voice pinched with the kind of wariness that came from living too long in places where bad things happened after dark. Still, Caleb rolled the window down, and the warm desert air poured in, thick with creosote and distant mesquite smoke. He called out to her, "You okay?" That's when the truck died. No sputter, no chug, no warning. Just a hard silence, like someone yanked a plug on the entire world. Caleb turned the key. Nothing. Dash lights dimmed, then flickered out. The dome light failed. The music cut. The only thing that remained was the sound of the cooling engine. Ticking and Mara's panicked breathing. The girl was gone. One blink and she wasn't there anymore. No, Mara whispered, grabbing his arm. Where'd she go? Caleb threw the door open, stumbled into the gravel shoulder, and swung the flashlight from the glove box toward the empty stretch of steel guardrail. Nothing. No footprints. No path down the embankment. Just high grass and thorn scrub leading to nowhere. Maybe she slipped down the side? He muttered, though he didn't believe it. Mara stayed in the truck, doors locked, watching him through the windshield like she was expecting something to grab him from the dark. He checked the road, the ditch, even climbed a few feet down into the sage and brittle brush, calling out. Not even a rustle in return. He climbed back in, wiped sweat from his brow, and tried the ignition again. The engine turned over like it had never died. They didn't talk for the next few miles, the road unraveling like black ribbon in the headlights. When the silence grew too loud, Mara muttered. She was mouthing something. Caleb glanced over. What? She wasn't praying. She was saying something, over and over. I couldn't hear it, but I could read her lips. I think it was a name. He didn't ask whose. That night they stayed in Fort Davis, at a roadside inn with yellowed curtains and a humming ice machine outside their room. Neither slept much. In the dead of night, around 3 a.m., Mara shook Caleb awake. She was sitting up, shaking, pale as bone. She was in the parking lot, she said, right outside the window. Same dress, staring up. I think she smiled. Caleb pulled back the curtain, empty lot. But the condensation on the outside of the glass had a handprint, small, delicate, with fingers too long. They left before dawn. A week passed. Then another. The incident turned into a half-joke between them, something they'd bring up when a road trip conversation lagged or when one of them got spooked by a weird noise in a motel. But something lingered. Every few nights, Mara would wake up screaming, heart-pounding, insisting she'd seen the girl again, sometimes in reflections, sometimes at the foot of the bed. Once, she swore she'd been sitting in the back seat of the truck when they were parked at a gas station near Abilene. She's not gone, Mara said one night, staring into her coffee with rings under her eyes deep as bruises. She's following. U.S.? Caleb didn't know what to say. There was no reasoning with a haunting when you couldn't understand its rules. He'd searched the local papers, asked a ranger at the Fort Davis station if anyone had gone missing on that stretch of 118. Nothing. Just the usual lost hikers or weather advisories. No ghost girl stories. No legends. But it got worse. Things started happening during the day. First, it was their phones. Random shutdowns near certain places. Then it was the GPS rerouting them without cause, always pulling them toward the Davis Mountains again, no matter where they were trying to go. One morning, Mara's phone lit up with a notification. Guardrail girl is waiting. Caleb thought she was joking until he saw it himself, just a black screen with a single line of text. No app open, no alert history. It was gone when he tried. To screenshot it. Mara stopped talking after that. She stopped sleeping too. Just sat at windows, scanning the roads, whispering things under her breath. Things that sounded like prayers but never ended like prayers should. They decided to go back. To end it, they left at dusk, just like before, taking the same route. Past Marfa, through the valley, into the cool climb of the mountains, where the desert gave way to oaks and rock faces that caught the dying sun like molten gold. It was all too familiar. Mile by mile, the dread settled back into Caleb's bones like it had never left. Every rise in the road, every fence post, every bend, he kept expecting to see her. And there she was. Same spot. White dress, bare feet, mouthing something. This time, he didn't stop the truck. He drove past, jaw clenched, knuckles white on the wheel. Mara didn't even look out the window. She was trembling, whispering that name again. Caleb didn't recognize it, maybe Alitha or Aaliyah or Alitha. It changed every time she said it, like her mouth wasn't made for those sounds. A mile past the spot, the truck died again. Not sputtered, not slowed. It simply ceased. This time, the air turned cold. Not desert cold, not nighttime chill, but grave cold. Wet and ancient, like cave breath. The headlights were still on, but they weren't shining forward anymore. They were shining inward, illuminating the cab, showing their own faces, not the road. Shadows pooled in the corners. Mara started screaming, "She's here. Oh God, she's here, she's in me." Then the lights went out completely. When they came back on, Caleb was alone. No sign of Mara. No footprints in the dust outside. The passenger door hadn't opened. Her phone was still in the seat. The seatbelt still latched. He got out, screaming her name, ran to the guardrail, down into the brush. Nothing. The stars blinked above like blind eyes. The wind didn't blow. No cars passed. The only sound was a soft clicking from behind him. He turned. She was sitting on the guardrail again, only now she wore Mara's face and her lips were still moving, still saying that name, and Caleb understood it now that it wasn't a name. It was a command. One he couldn't resist, one that made him walk toward the edge and sit beside her, barefoot, knees knocking, mouthing it back into the dark. It was near midnight when their tires finally crossed the worn strip of asphalt that marked the Texas-New Mexico border. No welcome sign, no fanfare. Just a dented metal pole leaning sideways and a cracked green marker that read State Line in faded white paint, half-eaten by rust. They'd been on the road since early afternoon, two friends escaping the heaviness of the week with no destination in mind. Just the vague idea of getting somewhere different, somewhere far. Thomas was driving, a quiet man who never said more. Van needed. Jenna rode shotgun, restless fingers tapping the window, her head bouncing to the soft beat of a playlist long forgotten. They were halfway into a conversation that was more silence than words when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the driver's side window, hard enough to make Thomas flinch and swerve slightly on the shoulderless road. They both turned at the same time. A man stood there, no more than a foot from the glass, pale like he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. He wore a flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans, his boots caked in something dark. His face wasn't right. Not disfigured exactly, but off, like a wax sculpture left too close to heat. One eye slightly lower than the other, mouth thin and trembling. He looked 30 maybe, but there was an oldness in him, something behind his eyes that made Jenna suck in her breath. He raised one hand in apology and leaned closer. "I'm sorry," he said, barely audible. "I didn't mean to scare you. I need help." Thomas rolled the window down an inch, You all right?" The man nodded too quickly, too hard. "Car died. Been walking a while. I thought maybe if you're heading west, maybe I could ride with you." Jenna leaned closer. "Where's your car?" He hesitated. Blinked. His smile was slow and uneven. "You already passed me once." Thomas's hand stiffened on the wheel. "What? You passed me?" "About 12 miles back, before the gas station that was closed." I waved, but you didn't stop. Thomas looked at Jenna. She shook her head. "We didn't see anyone." "I was there," the man said softly. "I've been trying to catch up since. Please, just a ride until the next town." Thomas hesitated. Everything about the man felt wrong, but his voice was low and calm, almost hypnotic. Jenna was watching him closely now, something unsettled playing behind her eyes. Against better judgment, Thomas reached for the door lock. The click echoed unnaturally loud in the cabin. The man opened the back door and slid in without another word. The smell hit them first. Not sweat or dirt like you'd expect from someone who'd been walking. It was cold, mildewed, like an old cellar, damp and left shut for years. Jenna rolled down her window without saying a word. The man said nothing, just sat quietly, staring out the windshield like he belonged there. They drove no one spoke for. The next 10 miles. The road narrowed, cutting through scraggly brush and occasional fence posts that leaned like they'd been abandoned mid-job. The man didn't ask where they were going, didn't say a word, just hummed low and tuneless, under his breath. A sound you couldn't place but couldn't forget. Thomas kept checking the rear view. Once, he caught the man staring directly at him, eyes wide and unblinking. "What's your name?" Jenna asked, finally, her voice tight. The man didn't answer at first. "Then, I had one, long time ago." Another pause. "They called me Cal. Back then? Back when?" His smile didn't touch his eyes. Back when people knew to stop at the state line. Before things changed. Thomas slowed the car slightly. "What things?" Cal's head tilted, slowly, mechanically. "You don't see it yet, do you?" Jenna turned fully in her seat. "See what?" He leaned forward, hands resting on the back of their seats. "The loop." "What loop?" Thomas asked, though his voice cracked. "You've been here before. Same road, same markers, same mistake." Jenna's breathing turned shallow. "We've never driven this road before." Cal just stared at her. "Then why do you recognize? The fence with the 3 slats missing? Or the billboard that's blank on both sides? Or that same hawk that hasn't moved from the wire?" Thomas felt a chill slide down his neck. He hadn't noticed before, but the details clicked. The missing slats, the empty billboard. The hawk, they had seen them. All of them, twice. He hit the brakes. The car screeched to a stop in the middle of the road. Dust curled up in lazy spirals around them. He turned around. Fully. "What's going on?" Cal leaned back again, smiling wide. "You crossed a line you shouldn't have. Everyone does eventually, but most folks don't stop. Most just keep driving till it's too late." Jenna's voice trembled. "Too late for what?" "To get out." Thomas reached for his phone. No signal, no bars. Just the battery symbol, blinking red even though it had been fully charged 20 minutes ago. Jenna checked hers. Same thing. She tried the map app. It just spun. Cal spoke again, but quieter. "They say the road past the line was cursed in 52. Some say it was the storm. Some say the family that disappeared into the ravine. But something changed. Folks kept seeing things. Kept finding themselves driving in circles. Picking up strangers. Who knew too much. Sometimes they made it back. Most times." He trailed off. Thomas turned the car around. "We're going back." Cal shook his head slowly. "You can try. You'll just pass me again." Jenna's hand clamped down on Thomas's arm. "Drive." He did, but the further they went, the more familiar everything became. A tire tread on the shoulder, a soda can with the same dent and rust ring, the billboard, the fence, and that damn hawk frozen on the wire, head cocked like it was listening. Then 3 knocks. This time from the back window. Thomas jerked the wheel. Jenna screamed. The car swerved but stayed on the road. They both looked behind them. The back seat was empty. Cal was gone. No door had opened. No noise. Just dash gone. Thomas pulled over. Heart thudding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He jumped out. Looked around. Nothing. Desert and dust. Jenna sat frozen in the passenger seat, staring at the dash. Then she whispered, "Why's the clock blinking 1:13?" He looked. The dash clock had reset. 1:13 a.m. blinking. Static. He climbed back in and hit the gas. They passed the hawk. Again. The billboard. Again. And then, ahead a man, standing on the side of the road. Same flannel. Same boots. Same pale face. He raised a hand to wave. Jenna began crying softly. Thomas didn't stop, didn't slow. They flew past him, gravel spitting. Behind them, through the rearview mirror, the man stood motionless, watching, until he was gone again. They drove until dawn, somewhere near Fort Stockton. The GPS clicked back on. The signal returned. The clock reset to 6:04 a.m. The road opened into town. They didn't speak for the rest of the trip. Not until they hit the lights of a diner and the sound of cars again. Civilization, familiarity, life. Jenna finally broke. The silence. "We never gave him a ride," she whispered. Thomas nodded slowly. "But we still passed him." That night, they checked the car for anything unusual. Nothing. Until Jenna found a folded piece of paper under the back seat. Yellowed, brittle. It was an obituary. A man named Calvin Reese. Died August 3rd, 1952. Age 32. Found on the State Line Road, body burned from the inside out. No clear cause of death. They buried him in an unmarked grave to avoid attention, the article said. Locals blamed the heat. The last line read, "He was found near a rusted sign that simply read State Line. He had no ID. Only a note in his pocket that said, 'You already passed me once.'" Thomas burned the paper. But he never drove west. Again. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the road gets long and the silence gets deep, he swears he hears 3 knocks on his window. Always at 1:13 m. Always just past the state line. It started the way these things usually do, something just off enough to notice but not enough to act on. Joey and Miranda were pulling their trailer down a dead-end gravel road outside Spur, Texas. They were looking for a spot Joey's cousin had told them about, a little clearing at the end of a service road behind some brush. Free, quiet, no lights. Exactly what they wanted. The road dipped down between dried-up cotton fields, and the only sounds were the occasional chirp of cicadas and the crunch of tires over loose rock. Joey had been driving since Lubbock and was getting that desert highway fuzz in his brain. Miranda was checking her phone, but there hadn't been signal for 20 miles. She just stared at the screen like it might suddenly wake up and give her something to focus on. That's when Joey noticed it in the mirror. A red pickup late. 80s Ford square body, rust curling around the wheel wells, coming up behind them. No headlights, no engine noise. Just there. It wasn't tailgating, but it wasn't backing off either. Keeping perfect distance. Joey tapped the brake. It slowed. He sped up. It kept pace. Miranda finally looked up. "You see that?" "Yeah," Joey muttered. "Been there a minute? Why's it got no lights on? Maybe they forgot." Miranda snorted, then glanced behind them again. "You sure it ain't being towed or something?" Joey looked harder. The way it stayed. Dead center in the mirror, not bobbing or weaving like something being towed. No tow bars, no straps, and it was reversing. Not just idling, wheels turning backward, but smooth as hell. Like it was on rails. There was no dust trail either. Just silence and motion. They reached the dead end, a small loop barely wide. Enough to turn the trailer. The plan had been to swing around, back in, unhook, maybe crack a couple beers. Joey slowed, eased into the loop, and started backing into the brush. That's when the red pickup stopped. It didn't pull in. It didn't turn around. It just sat at the entrance of the loop, tail toward them now, like it was watching. But the weird thing, the thing that turned Joey's stomach to ice, was that even facing away, the damn thing was still reversing. Wheels turning slowly in reverse, backing down the road. But facing them, what the hell? Joey whispered. The truck reached the dip in the road and paused again, maybe 40 feet off. Then its lights blinked on, bright yellow floods that flickered like old halogen beams. Miranda flinched. "Okay, no," she said, seatbelt already unclicking. "Nope, no thank you. Get us out of here." Joey hesitated, foot hovering between the brake and the gas. "It's not doing anything. It honked," she said. "Didn't you hear that? Right before the lights came on." Joey shook his head. There was no one inside. They could both see it now. Clear as day. The windshield was too clean, too exposed. They could see the dash, the ripped bench seat, even a rosary swaying from the mirror, but no driver. Not a silhouette, not a shadow. Joey stepped out. Miranda hissed, "Joey, don't. I just want to see. Maybe it's some kind of prank." He walked slow. The air felt tight, like walking underwater. Gravel crunched beneath his boots, but the sound didn't carry. When he got within 20 feet, the lights shut off again. Just blinked out like someone had flicked a switch inside. The thing was a dead husk now, red metal hulking under moonlight. And then it honked. A long, low blast that didn't belong to any truck built in the last 50 years. It was deeper, hungrier. Joey stopped. Something shifted beneath the truck, a scuttling sound, quick and close to the ground. He crouched, heart punching his ribs. A breeze passed behind him, cold as lake water. He turned fast, but the road was empty behind him. Only the pale outline of Miranda standing by the trailer, arms folded tight across her chest. Then the engine roared to life. Joey leapt back. But the truck didn't move forward. It didn't peel out or charge. It reversed. Fast, tires spinning backward down the road, gaining speed. But no dust, no roar. Just that unnatural silence as it slid down the gravel like it was being reeled in by something unseen. It vanished behind the bend. Joey ran back to the trailer, mouth dry. Miranda was already inside, throwing things in a bag. "We're not staying." "Here," she said. "I don't care how cheap it is." Joey nodded. They turned around, careful on the narrow road. But as they approached the spot where the truck had disappeared, the lights came back. This time from the ditch. The truck was down there now, parked sideways across a small dry creek, its front end pressed against the embankment. But again, no driver, no tracks leading in, no broken brush. Just sitting there like it had been placed by hand. They passed it slowly, Miranda holding her breath. As they drew even with it, the horn blared again, just once, but louder. Like it came from inside the cab and the sky above them all at once. They didn't speak again until they hit pavement. No sign of the truck behind them, no lights, no sound. But Joey kept checking the mirror anyway, knuckles white on the wheel. They drove until daylight touched the horizon and stopped at a diner with a flickering neon cactus and a waitress who looked like she hadn't slept since '97. Miranda went to the bathroom. Joey sat at the counter, hands trembling just enough to make the coffee ripple. An old man with one cloudy eye leaned over from the next stool. He smelled like motor oil and peppermints. "You see it?" he asked. Joey blinked. "See what?" "The truck, red one, no driver, shows up on the dead end near Spur." Joey didn't say anything, just stared. The man nodded slowly. "Been following folks for years, only ever backs up. Don't like people looking under it." Joey finally found his voice. "What's under it?" The man smiled, a gap where 3 teeth should have been. "Nothing that belongs in Texas." He sipped his coffee. "Or anywhere else." Miranda came out, eyes still wide, color drained from her face. "We're not going back that way," she said. "We'll take the long route." Joey nodded. And when they walked back to the truck, Joey noticed something he hadn't seen before. A smear on the side mirror, like someone had dragged 3 fingers across the dust. Not human fingers, longer, thinner, and burned into the glass like it had been done with acid. He wiped it off with a napkin, but the glass stayed cloudy. They drove on, eastbound toward anywhere else. But the mirrors kept fogging up every few miles. And once, around dusk, Joey glanced in the rear view and swore he saw tail lights again, far off, red and square and rolling backward, down a road they hadn't even turned onto yet. It started around 2:11 a.m., give or take a minute. Time blurs when you've been on the road that long. The stretch between Cotulla and Dilley was dead quiet, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural even for South Texas. Just me, my sister Carly, and her boyfriend Rob in his old Chevy Trailblazer, heading back from Laredo after a weekend visiting our uncle. Rob drove, Carly snored, and I was in the back seat watching the dark world roll by. We'd all taken turns behind the wheel that day, but now it was Rob's shift, and he was laser focused on the road like always. 10 and 2, no music, no distractions. That's just who he was. Reliable, stiff, boring, but tonight, boring would've been a blessing. We were coming up on the outskirts of Dilley when we saw it. A single parked car. Nothing unusual about that, except it was on the side of the access road near an abandoned-looking feed store, half hidden in the tall mesquite and cactus brush with no other lights or traffic in sight. Old white sedan, maybe a Chrysler or Buick, one of those mid-90s models with a long nose and square back. But that wasn't what made us slow down. It was the crying. Thin, high-pitched, repetitive, coming from the trunk. At first, I thought maybe it was a cat. Then Carly sat up straight in her seat like someone had poured ice water down her back. "Do y'all hear that?" We pulled over. Not right next to it, just a little up the road. Rob flicked on the hazards, rolled down the windows, and killed the engine. And sure enough, we all heard it, crying, like a child's, but not right. It had that metallic echo, like someone sobbing inside a tin can. The kind of sound that doesn't register as fully human until your brain's done a few laps trying to disprove it. Carly whispered, "That's not a damn animal, y'all." Rob said, "I'm calling 911. Double quotes good. Smart, sensible." But while he fumbled for a signal and started explaining where we were, Carly and I stepped out. The summer air was thick with heat, but something about it felt off still, like a greenhouse. After dark. No cicadas, no wind, not even a car in the distance. Just that crying, steady and slow, like whoever was inside had been doing it a long time. The car didn't have plates. No dust on it either, which was weird for where it sat. We crept closer. The trunk had no markings, no logos. Just that same, wailing from inside, now rising and falling like waves. Carly grabbed my arm hard. "Do you think someone's in there?" "I don't know. Should we open it?" "No," I said too quickly. "We wait for the cops." Except the signal kept cutting out. Rob was pacing in a little circle by the truck, phone held high like some desperate offering to the sky. He kept saying, "Yes, between Dili and Kotula. Just past the intersection, yes. There's crying hello?" Then the line died again. That's when the crying changed. It stopped, just for a second. Then it started again, louder now. Faster, panicked, like whoever or whatever was in there knew we were near and was begging us not to leave. Carly let go of my arm and took a step closer to the trunk. "I think we should just pop it," she said, voice shaking. "What if it's a kid?" But there was no keyhole, no latch on the outside. Just smooth metal. Seamless. I reached forward, despite everything in me screaming no. Laid my palm on the trunk, ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer, not under the Texas sun all day. I jerked my hand back. Carly stared at me. "What?" "Touch it," I said. She did. Yanked her hand away with a gasp. "Jesus, it's freezing." Then we blinked. And the car was gone. I swear to God it was there. One moment, white sedan, crying in the trunk, heatless metal. Then gone, vanished. Nothing but flattened grass and gravel dust where it had been. 10 seconds, maybe not even. I looked back toward the Trailblazer. Rob was staring at us, mouth open, phone dangling from his fingers. "Where'd it go?" he said. "We didn't hear an engine," I said. "No lights," Carly whispered. "Nothing." But we all agreed on one thing: the crying hadn't stopped. It was still there. All around us. Echoing. Not from a direction, but from within. And when we got back in the car, windows up, doors locked, Rob frantically trying to reconnect to 911, that crying followed us. Not on the road. Not behind us. Inside us. I closed my eyes for a second. It got louder. I opened them. It faded. We didn't speak again until we hit the first gas station in Dili, just past the Love's Travel stop. Inside, under the blinding fluorescence, everything felt normal again. Rob was pale, shaking, buying gas he didn't need just to feel busy. Carly stood by the coffee machine, pretending to pick a flavor. I went to the restroom, locked the door, splashed water on my face. Then I heard it again, that same crying. Only this time, it was coming from behind the mirror. I stared at my reflection, and for a second, just a flicker, I saw the inside of a trunk. Rusted metal, blood-smudged carpet. Something squirming in the dark, and I screamed. We didn't drive back that way again for months. When we did, it was broad daylight, middle of a Sunday, plenty of traffic on the road. But I still watched every parked car like it might move, like it might vanish, like it might call. None of us talked about it much after that. The cops never called us back. No reports of missing kids or cars matching that description. Nothing on the news. Carly has trouble sleeping now. Says when she closes her eyes, she still hears it. Like a recording playing from inside her skull. Me? Sometimes I dream about that trunk. Sometimes it's open. Sometimes I'm inside it. And sometimes, when I'm really tired, just drifting. Off I hear that cry again. Thin, metallic, endless, begging me to look, begging me to come back. It was the kind of road trip where everything starts fine, and then a wrong turn or a strange stop changes the whole trajectory. Natalie and Eric were halfway through Texas, cutting west from Abilene toward Pecos on I-20. They'd been arguing. Most of the way, mostly about nothing, where to stop for the night, which motel looked cleaner, why he never used the damn blinker. That kind of tension that builds up between people who've been in a car too long together. Was around 9:45 p.m. when they pulled into Merkel, Texas. Not a planned stop. Just one of those roadside breaks where your stomach or bladder decides. For you? They saw the gas station from the interstate, one of those older ones with a single glowing sign that buzzed like a dying fly. The parking lot was empty except for a rusted-out Dodge and an oil-streaked 18-wheeler idling on the far end. The air smelled like hot tires and spilled diesel. Dry air, a hint of manure blowing in from somewhere out in the dark fields. Eric pumped the gas. Natalie went inside to grab snacks. The clerk was behind a thick plexiglass window, yellow fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He didn't look up when she came in, just kept staring at a small black and white TV that showed nothing but static. She grabbed a couple of Cokes, some chips, and a cold sandwich in a plastic coffin. When she got back to the car, Eric wasn't there. Keys were still in the ignition. Fuel cap back on. His phone was in the queue folder. Her first thought was bathroom. She looked around and saw the little outbuilding to the left of the station, a squat tan concrete block with a single flickering light above the doorway. She walked toward it slowly. There was no sign, no men or women. Just a faded blue door. Old and crusted at the edges, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. She knocked once. No answer. Knocked again, harder. Still nothing. "Natalie?" she called out. "Eric?" She tried the door. There was no handle, just a round hole where one should have been. Just metal, hollow, like it had been torn off or rusted. Away decades ago. She used her sleeve and pushed the door open with her palm. It creaked, groaned like a dying animal. Inside was pitch black, but it didn't smell like a gas station bathroom. No piss, no bleach. Just earth. Damp earth and something sweeter underneath, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. She flicked her phone light on. The light landed on stone rough, gray, uneven. Not tile, not drywall, not anything that belonged inside a bathroom. The walls curved inward, narrowing like a throat. They weren't brick either. They pulsed just a little, like something breathing behind them. The air had weight, like walking into a church basement after flood season. Her stomach turned, but she stepped forward. "Eric?" she said again, her voice bouncing weirdly, swallowed before it could echo. Her shoes crunched over something. She looked down and saw pebbles, or were they teeth? She knelt, picked one up. It was smooth. Too smooth. Not a rock. She dropped it fast. She went in further, expecting a stall, a urinal, maybe even graffiti or a mop bucket. But there was just one thing inside, something huddled in the corner. At first, she thought it was a pile of coats. Then it moved, a soft, jerking twitch. She aimed her phone light at it. It wasn't Eric. Not anymore. It had his face. Same jawline. Same mop of brown hair. But the eyes were black pits, pulled wide open, like the skin had stretched back and refused to blink. His mouth moved, but no sound came. The rest of him was wrong. His hands were buried in the floor, or what she thought was the floor. Fingers sunk deep into the stone like it had softened for him and then hardened again. His chest rose and fell. Too fast, like he was being suffocated by nothing. She ran, or tried to. When she turned to bolt, the door was gone. Not closed, gone. The wall had sealed behind her. Smooth, uninterrupted stone that still pulsed gently like it was listening. She screamed, slammed her fists against it. No response. Not even a vibration from the other side. She turned, back against the wall, shaking, sweating, heart crashing in her chest. The room was getting smaller. She could feel it. Not see it, but feel it. The air pressing in. The walls tightening like muscles around her. She looked at Eric, if it was still him, and now his mouth was wide open. Jaw unhinged like a snake's, and something moved inside his throat. She didn't want to know what. She remembered the stories. The stupid urban legends about bathroom. Stalls that led nowhere, about people disappearing on road trips. About doorless rooms in places that weren't built by people. She thought they were bullshit. Until now. She dropped to her knees and screamed his name. Screamed until her throat burned. The room responded by humming, low and bone deep, like a sound you don't hear but feel. It wasn't human. Wasn't machine. It was ancient Dot, and it wanted her Dot, the last thing she saw before the phone. Light blinked out was Eric's mouth smiling. Just the mouth, everything else frozen, and from inside it, something wet and pink unfurled like a tongue, but too long too. Wide. It touched the floor and began pulling itself out, inch by inch. Natalie kicked at the wall again, scratched with her nails, screamed for anyone at the gas station to hear her. No one came. Outside, the clerk kept watching static. The trucker had long since driven off. The Dodge was empty. And inside the car, her phone buzzed once. A message from Eric. Just one word. Inside. The next morning, when the new shift came to open the station, the bathroom was locked tight, not boarded up, not chained, just gone. The door was flush with the wall, no seams, no handle. Nothing but faded paint and a faint, moist heat radiating from the concrete. No one ever found them. Not officially. Her parents filed a report. His brother put up posters. The station clerk said he didn't remember seeing them. The security footage stopped recording just before they pulled in. Some said they ran off. Others thought it was a kidnapping. But truckers still whisper about the gas station off I-20 near Merkel. A bathroom no one uses. The one that sometimes breathes when you walk by. And every so often, a driver says they hear something when they stop late at night. Not voices. Not screams. Just a slow, wet, dragging sound coming from deep underground. And then 3 knocks. From the inside. They were somewhere between Odessa and Pecos when the AC in the Jeep gave out. A July sun bore down like it had a grudge, turning the cracked leather seats into stovetops and painting sweat stains into Darren's back before he could even finish his sentence about the next gas station. Amanda had her feet propped on the dash, one hand on her phone, the other lazily drawing shapes on the fogged passenger window with her nail. The GPS had frozen again. Nothing new. West Texas heat could kill a satellite signal faster than it could warp a road sign. Darren squinted past the glare and muttered something about Monahan's being just up the road. Though he hadn't seen a sign in 10 miles, they hadn't planned on veering off. 1 to 20. They were supposed to be cutting across Texas to hit Carlsbad Caverns by nightfall. But a wrong turn near Crane, some bickering, and then a detour suggested by the GPS had sent them zigzagging through oil-field back roads. The kind of roads where you pass rusted-out pump jacks and never see another soul for hours. The teen was standing by a mesquite bush just past a warped fence line, holding a folded piece of paper and wearing a denim jacket that looked too clean for the dust. He didn't wave them down, didn't stick out a thumb, just stood there like he was waiting. Darren slowed the Jeep instinctively. "You see that?" Amanda glanced up. "Kid? Looks like it." "Should we?" "Yeah," Darren said, already pulling on to the shoulder. Something about the way the kid stood bothered him, but there was also something about the emptiness of the road that made turning your back on another human being feel criminal. The kid approached with the casual stride of someone used to being alone. He was maybe 16. Pale face under a mop of dusty black hair, eyes too sunken for someone that age. He didn't say a word, just held out the map like he was handing over a menu. Amanda took it. "What's this?" The kid blinked, then turned and walked back toward the scrub. Didn't wait for thanks. Didn't look back. Just stepped behind the bush and disappeared. Darren jumped out, rounded the front of the Jeep. "Hey, you need a ride or—" But the kid was gone. No footprints in the sand. No shadow in the brush. Nothing but the map Amanda now unfolded with it. Stiff fingers. It was hand-drawn, inked in thick black lines. The paper was warm, not from the sun, but from within, like it had been in a pocket near the skin too long. The roads had no names, just jagged paths veering like lightning bolts between sketched hills and angry little circles, labeled with things like screaming place and pond that moves. Every road eventually ended in the same phrase, "Turn around now." Amanda flipped the paper over. The back was blank except for what looked like a fingerprint burned into the bottom corner. Black, greasy, too big to be the kids. "I don't like this," she said, trying to laugh, but it came out wrong. "It's probably some local prank." Darren nodded slowly, but his throat felt dry. "Yeah, let's just get to Monahan's." They drove on in silence, the AC sputtering back to life with a wheeze. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the desert. But the map stayed in Amanda's lap, her eyes drawn to it even when she tried to look away. And somewhere between glancing at the hand-drawn lines in the windshield, she noticed something was off. "We passed that rock already." "What rock?" She pointed. A jagged leaning stone shaped like a crooked finger. "We passed that twice." Darren frowned. "It's a desert." "Rocks look the same." "No, it's the same." They kept going. 10 more minutes, and there it was again. Same rock, same bend. Same flock of birds spiraling like smoke above a distant ridge. Amanda turned the map sideways, then upside down. The Jeep lurched over a bump, and she dropped it onto the floor. Darren pulled over, breathing heavy, suddenly aware of the sweat sliding down his ribs. He got out, paced, then turned to kick a tumbleweed, but it dissolved under his foot like ash dot. The wind was picking up now, sharp and unnatural, carrying a low whistling hum that didn't seem to fade as they moved. Amanda picked up the map again. The roads had changed. There were more of them now, and everyone still ended the same way. "Turn around now." Except the last one. That one just said, "You're here." "Darren," she said quietly, "it's showing us this road. Look, this curve, this tree line." He looked, and it was true. The drawing had changed. The Jeep was there, drawn in uncanny detail, even down to the tiny dent in the rear bumper. The tree near the bend was missing a limb just like the one ahead of them. "I think we're being watched," he whispered. They got back in the Jeep, drove faster. But the road twisted in ways that didn't feel real. At one point, they passed a single gas pump in the middle of a clearing, no building. No hoses, just the pump, painted red and silver. The kind used 50 years ago. A single fly buzzed against Amanda's window. Then another, then 50. They swarmed the car for a full minute before peeling away in one synchronized movement, disappearing into the trees that hadn't been there a moment ago. Darren hit the brakes. The sky was the wrong color, purple-gray like a healing bruise. No sun, no clouds, no wind anymore, just quiet. Amanda checked her phone. No signal, battery drained. Darren's was dead too. The map in her lap was now damp, as if it had been pulled from a river, and it was growing darker with something that looked like ink but smelled like old blood. They turned the Jeep around, or thought they did. The road behind them had collapsed into sand and brush, no tire tracks left, just open land and 3 crosses hammered into the dirt. Rough wood, no names, just carvings. "We took the map, we kept driving, we didn't LAST," and Amanda screamed, and Darren floored the gas. The tires spun but didn't move, like the road was holding them in place. Then, with a snap like bones breaking, the Jeep jerked forward and they were moving again. Trees appeared on both sides, too tall for West Texas. Pine and birch, twisted, blackened. Things moved behind them, pale shapes slipping between trunks. They didn't stop driving. Not when they passed a house with no doors. Not when they passed a woman standing ankle-deep in fire who didn't burn. Not when the map began to curl at the corners and pulse in Amanda's hands. Eventually, they hit Pavement again, a real road, with signs. One said Monaghan's to 2 miles. Another said rest stop 1 mile. They pulled into the rest stop like survivors of a storm. Got out, stumbled toward the vending machines and bathrooms. No one else was there, not even a parked car. The sky looked normal again. Amanda crumpled the map and tossed it into the trash. It was back in her lap when they returned to the Jeep. Didn't drive to Carlsbad. They didn't go home. They drove and drove because the road kept going. And every sign said the same thing now, no matter what direction they turned. You're already on it. And every time Amanda looked at the map, it showed them a new road, but never a way out. Only the words growing darker with each mile. Turn around. Now turn around, now turn around in OW until one day, even those words stopped showing up. They were coming back from a family gathering in Newton, coasting down Highway 63 just before it curved north of Jasper. Beth was asleep in the passenger seat, head tilted against the window, mouth slightly open. David had the wheel, keeping a steady hand despite the sleep tugging at the back of his neck like a child pulling at his shirt. Their 3-year-old daughter, Ruby, was out cold in her car seat, humming softly with each bump in the road. The night was thick and still, the pine trees closing in on both sides like tall, silent sentinels. No other cars for miles. Just them, just the road. Just the quiet whisper of tires on old Texas asphalt. That's when the semi appeared. It came out of nowhere. One moment the road ahead was empty, the next, headlights. Bright and blinding. Too close. Too fast. A horn bellowed like something dying, and then it jackknifed. The trailer spun wide like a blade, metal shrieking as it folded in on itself. Sparks lit the trees in quick, violent flashes. The truck's cab lifted off the ground, twisted, and smashed down onto its side. Something exploded, a pop more than a boom, and flames danced under the undercarriage. David swerved hard, heart slamming, foot jamming the brake to the floor until the whole car screeched to a stop on the shoulder. Beth jolted awake, gasping. Ruby cried out in the back, frightened by the sudden chaos. David jumped out before Beth even processed what she was seeing. The heat was in the air. Smoke curled above the treetops. The trailer had blocked the entire highway, tires still spinning where they weren't melted to the pavement. David ran toward it, waving his arms, yelling, "Hey, hey! Is anyone in there?" But no one answered. No movement. Just the creak of metal and the low hiss of something cooling. Beth had the presence of mind to grab the dashcam SD card. Before she followed with Ruby clutched to her chest. She dialed 911 with shaking fingers. A dispatcher answered on the third ring, calm and slow as if nothing in the world could surprise her. "There's been an accident," Beth said. "Just north of Jasper. A semi. It flipped. We just saw it. Please send someone now. There's fire." She gave the mile marker. Gave their names. The dispatcher promised help would arrive within 15 minutes, but by the time Beth looked up again, the fire was gone. No embers. No truck, no smoke. Nothing. The road was clear. David stood in the middle of it, slowly turning in place, mouth hanging open like he'd been knocked stupid. Where'd it go? He muttered when she caught up. It was here. It was right here. He pointed at the dark stretch of highway like she couldn't see it. She did. And it was clean. No skid marks. No debris. The smell of burning rubber gone. Not even a whisper of it left behind. Beth grabbed his arm, tugged. "You saw it, right? I wasn't dreaming? We all saw it." He nodded, numb. Yeah, I saw it." They waited on the side of the road anyway, flashing the hazards, scanning the tree line, heartbeats loud in their heads. When the state trooper arrived, A younger guy named Masterson with a receding hairline and a steady hand on his flashlight. They told him what they'd seen. He checked his radio. We didn't get any reports of a missing semi. No drivers. No incidents along this route. Beth offered the dashcam card. We recorded it. It's on here. Masterson plugged it into his patrol car's onboard system. The file was there, time-stamped, about 7 minutes long. But when he hit play, the screen showed only static. Then green-tinted blobs. And then nothing, just darkness. He frowned, tapped. Keys fast-forwarded. This isn't right, he muttered. You sure this was working? Beth nodded. It recorded the whole drive from Newton. He ejected the card and handed it back. We'll file a report, but I don't have anything to go on here. No evidence of a crash. No tire marks. No broken glass. You sure it wasn't a dream? David stiffened. We were all awake. We saw a jackknife. It flipped right in front of us. There were flames. Masterson didn't argue. Just wrote it down. He left the card and told them to drive safe. But Beth didn't sleep that night, and David didn't talk for the next 2 hours of the drive home. The next day, they plugged the dashcam card into their laptop. The files were corrupted, unreadable. Beth tried 3 different video recovery tools. The only thing that would play was a short clip near the end of the corrupted footage, 2 seconds long. It showed their car pulled to the shoulder. No semi in sight. But in the far background, barely visible in the tree line, something moved. Something tall. Too tall to be a person. Beth closed the laptop. 3 days later, David started getting emails from a sender named Cab52Death. The subject line read, I saw you. The body was empty except for a link. He didn't click it. The next one came an hour later, same format. But this time the subject line read, You left me. Then why didn't you help? David stopped checking his inbox. Beth found one in her spam folder. Subject line, Stay off 63. They tried contacting the local precinct. Officer Masterson wasn't listed. No record of him. No trooper by that name. Even the card he'd given. Them. Just a blank sheet of white cardstock. No badge number. No name. The night after they tried calling the Texas Highway Patrol, someone knocked on their door. At 2:13 a.m. David checked the peephole. No one. When he turned, he saw Ruby standing at the end of the hall, pointing at the front door with one hand holding her stuffed animal in the other. There's someone big out there, she whispered. Beth grabbed her, heart pounding. David opened the door anyway. No one. Just their driveway. Silent, moonlit, but wet tire tracks long, wide, oily, curled around the edge of the curb, dragging something heavy along with them. They didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, their mailbox was crushed flat, metal curled inward like a fist had grabbed it. And on the side of their house, carved deep into the wood, were 2 words, Look back. David didn't go to work that day, or the next. He started pulling up maps, looking at trucker forums. He found a thread buried 12 years deep titled, Phantom Rig on 63 Jasper? It had 6 replies. The last one reads, Saw it in '07. It was a white cab. No driver. Flipped right in front of me. Whole damn road lit up, then it was gone. My camcorder melted in the back seat. Still hear the horn in my sleep. Another post. Don't stop if you see it. Don't get out. It don't crash like a real truck. It's trapping. Beth told him to stop, to delete everything. But David couldn't. He said it was still watching. Sighed. It didn't crash that night. It arrived. A week after the incident, Beth walked into the living room to find David sitting in front of the laptop, eyes glassy, mouthing something to himself. The screen was black except for a paused video. Somehow, the corrupted footage had played. And in the last frame, barely visible in the smoke and static, was a man, or something like a man, sitting behind the wheel of the semi. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared directly into the lens. As if he knew. As if he had always known. That night, their daughter Ruby woke up screaming, saying she had a dream that a big truck ran over her daddy. David disappeared the next day. His car was found off a back road, engine still warm. His phone was in the seat, screen cracked, no signs of struggle. Just one single streak of black oil running from the road to the woods. Beth moved after that. Changed her number. Changed everything. But sometimes, when she's driving late at night and the road is empty and the pines close in, she hears it. A horn, low and angry. And in her mirror, just for a moment, she swears she sees it. Headlights with no source. A white cab. A trailer folding in slow motion like it's waiting to unfold again, and she presses the gas harder. Because she knows. It's not trying to pass her. It's trying to follow. The gas station sat alone on the stretch of Highway 277 that cut south through Eagle, passed like a knife through the dust. The sun had dipped beneath the horizon just an hour earlier, leaving behind a sky smeared in bruised purples and bleeding reds, and the heat still shimmered off the blacktop like it hadn't gotten the memo that night had fallen. Darren and Lisa had been driving since Midland, trying to make it to a small Airbnb near the border that promised ranch-style privacy and desert starlight. But their gas light blinked on somewhere around Del Rio, and by the time they rolled into the gravel lot of the old station, the needle was sitting on E. It looked closed. Or maybe abandoned. The sign above the rust-bitten awning read, "Morgan's Gas and Stop," in cracked, sun-faded paint. One of the bulbs in the flickering open sign buzzed like it was struggling against death. No other cars. No sound except the soft pinging of their cooling engine and a faint radio static drifting from somewhere inside. They hesitated. But Lisa, practical as ever, pushed open the passenger door and said, "We're not going to make it otherwise." Darren followed. The bell above the door didn't chime. It was hanging there, sure, but motionless, like the air inside had gone still long ago. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a harsh, buzzing light that made everything look jaundiced. The shelves were stocked, but only with canned goods, no brand names. Just generic labels like meat product and beans in bold block letters. A dusty fridge hummed behind a glass case near the wall, filled with old glass bottles of orange, soda, and what looked like milk, though none had expiration dates. The clerk stood behind the counter like he'd been carved from wax. His head was bowed, gaze fixed straight ahead, pale, thin, older than he looked. His eyes never lifted when they approached. Not when Darren said, "Evening," not when Lisa asked if the pump was working, not even when the door shut behind them. With a final sounding click, he just reached beneath the counter, slid a key forward on a small metal ring marked 3, and held out his hand, palm up. Lisa glanced at Darren. "You take cash?" Darren asked, pulling out a wrinkled 20. The man didn't nod. Didn't blink. Just took the bill with a motion like a claw machine's grabber, slow, deliberate, mechanical. He slipped it beneath the register, never once shifting his gaze from that middle distance. Then he slid a small receipt forward. Lisa picked it up. "Last ones," she read aloud, frowning. "What the hell does that mean?" The man didn't answer. Didn't move. They stood there for a beat too long, waiting for something, anything. A smile, a warning, a joke. But the silence stayed thick. Finally, Lisa muttered a quiet thanks, and they stepped outside again. Pump 3 was old. The analog kind with flip number dials and a cracked nozzle. No card reader. It groaned when Darren lifted it, but the gas flowed fine, even if it smelled off too sharp, almost chemical. "You saw that guy, right?" Lisa asked. "Didn't." Moved the whole time, didn't look at us once. Creepy, Darren agreed. Maybe blind? His eyes were open. They didn't talk much after that. Filled the tank, climbed back in. The lights inside the store still glowed faintly. The clerk still stood behind the counter. Still hadn't moved out as they pulled away. Lisa looked in the side mirror and said, "Wait, he's not behind the counter anymore." Darren slowed the car, squinted through the rear view. Empty. The light inside the station snapped off. He accelerated. Without saying a word, they drove in silence for a while, Eagle Pass shrinking in the rear view as the night wrapped around the highway like velvet. The desert on either side was endless and black, dotted only by the occasional fence post or prickly pear bush. No cars passed them, no lights. Just a moon like a cracked plate in the sky and the sound of tires over rough asphalt. That's when the receipt started smoking. It was in Lisa's lap. She'd folded it once, shoved it into her phone case, but now it had slid free again. A thin wisp of gray drifted up from the paper's edge. She hissed and dropped it, patting her jeans. Darren jerked the wheel slightly when she yelped. "It burned me," she snapped, fingers red. "It's Jesus, look." The paper on the floor mat curled as if touched by fire, but no flame was visible. Just smoke. Just heat. And before they could react, it crumbled into ash without a sound. They stopped talking after that. A mutual, unspoken agreement. Words weren't going to help. At exactly 9:19 p.m., their phones both powered off. No warning. Just black screens. At 9:22, the headlights flickered. At 9:24, the radio turned on by itself. A man's voice whispered through static. Not music, not a station. Just a slow, careful voice saying, "There is no return once the key is taken." Then it went silent. Darren pulled over, knuckles white on the wheel. They were somewhere west of Quemado. The road was dark and straight. And empty. He opened the glove compartment, found the key still sitting in the tray between them. Lisa picked it up, staring at the little 3 stamped into the dull metal. "Do we go back?" Darren shook his head. "No way I'm going back." There, but the headlights blinked again. Then the dash lights. Then everything shut off. Dead. No hum. No power, no sound. They sat in the stillness, breath shallow, ears straining for something, anything. Then, slow footsteps on gravel. Not behind them. In front. They stared through the windshield. A man stood 10 feet ahead. Pale, still, same dark slacks. Same greasy apron. The gas station clerk, but his head wasn't bowed now. It was tilted back. Eyes white, mouth wide. Hands reaching. Darren hit the lock button. Nothing. The man's hands pressed flat against the hood of the car. Not slamming. Not trying to break in. Just resting. Then he leaned forward slowly until his face was inches from the glass. He smiled. Lisa screamed. Darren fumbled for the door. Tried to start the engine. The clerk's mouth moved. Last ones. He mouthed. Then he vanished. Gone. Like smoke in the dark. The car restarted on its own. Radio silent. Lights steady. They drove. Until they hit the Airbnb, more a shack than a house, but they didn't care. Locked the doors. Didn't unpack. Barely slept. Just huddled under the thin blankets and waited for morning. When they told the host about the gas station, he frowned. Morgan's? That place burned down in 97. Owner died inside. Some folks say he never left. You sure that's where you stopped? Lisa didn't answer. She just opened her phone. The photo she'd taken of the receipt before it burned was still in her gallery. But the image had changed. The slip no longer said last. ONES. Now, in smeared black letters, it read, "See you at pump 4. It wasn't there the night before. Ethan was the last to head into the tent. He remembered glancing around the clearing before zipping the flap shut, just the fire dwindling to ash. The 3 empty chairs they dragged from the back of the Tacoma, and the soft shape of their gear tent pitched across from them. No one had pulled in. No headlights on the narrow dirt road that twisted in from Bastrop State Park's south entrance. No voices. No footsteps. Just the wind in the trees and the low creak of tall pines shifting in the night. But now, with the sun barely rising and a light mist curling over the forest floor, a tent stood 10 feet from theirs. Olive green. Too clean. Too still. Natalie was the first to speak, brushing her hair behind her ear and squinting toward the fabric shell. "That wasn't here last night." Ethan said nothing. He just stared. Sam knelt by the fire pit and jabbed the coals with a stick, stirring the gray into darker embers. "Someone must have set it up while we were sleeping," he mumbled. But even he didn't sound sure. He kept looking at the ground, no new tire marks, no boot prints in the damp earth, not even crushed pine needles or leaves around the perimeter of the new tent. Ethan stepped closer. The air smelled wrong. Not like dirt or ash or burnt coffee from the little camp stove. More like copper and something faintly sweet, like old flowers left too long in water. The tent had no brand logo, no zippers in sight, and its seams were oddly stitched, almost uneven, like it had been made by hand. Natalie made a sharp sound behind them, a startled kind of breath. "There's something on the ground." It was a piece of white paper, folded once, resting just beside a small, flat stone like it had been pinned down deliberately. A child's drawing, done in black crayon and thick, dragging lines. There were trees, a fire, 4 stick figures. 3 of them were grouped together, 2 taller, 1 shorter, all smiling. The 4th figure stood apart, arms stretched out. Its head was wide, almost bulbous. Its face was scribbled solid black. And all of them were standing outside a tent just like this one. Ethan turned the paper over. Nothing. Just the strange, faint pressure of something old and musty clinging to it. Natalie backed up and muttered, "Nope, nope, not staying here tonight." They knocked on the tent side. No answer. Sam crouched low and tried to find a flap or zipper. Still nothing. "Who the hell makes a tent with no way in?" he muttered. "This has to be a prank." But there was no laughter in the woods. No distant voices waiting for a reaction. Only silence. They packed up. Natalie insisted they leave the drawing behind. Ethan almost did, but something in him, some twitch of guilt or fear, made him fold it again and slip it into the glove box. They drove out of Bastrop on Highway 71, heading west toward Austin, brushing it all off as strange but explainable. Maybe someone had shown up after midnight. Maybe they'd been too tired to notice. They stopped for lunch in Elgin, burgers and hush puppies at a roadside shack with chipped paint and a patio of crooked plastic tables. Ethan went to pay and opened the glove box to grab his wallet. The drawing was still there, but it had changed. 5 figures now, all smiling, all standing close together. The 4th figure, the one with the black scribbled face, was still present. But now the black was smudged, blurred at the edges like it was melting. He didn't say anything. Not yet. That night, back in their apartment, Ethan laid the drawing on his desk. He sat there long after the others had gone to bed, staring at the new details. The trees behind the stick figures looked more defined now, twisted, charred at the edges. And there was something behind them, something gray and round, like a face halfway hidden in the branches. He told himself he'd throw it out in the morning. But when morning came, the drawing was gone, and in its place was another sheet of paper, folded the same way, with another image. A single tent in the middle of an open space. 2 figures standing in front of it. Ethan and Natalie. The date was Written in the bottom corner in childlike scrawl, "Tonight." He showed it to Natalie. She didn't laugh. She didn't tell him it was a prank. She just packed a bag and told Sam to come stay over. The three of them spent the night in a Holiday Inn near downtown, lights on, curtains drawn. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in the armchair and watched the hallway door. At 2:47 a.m., someone knocked once. Soft, polite. They didn't open it. They moved out a week later. A new place, farther north in Pflugerville. No more camping, they agreed. Not for a while. But the drawings kept showing up. Sometimes slid under the door. Sometimes left on the windshield of Ethan's car, even when it was locked in a garage. Each one more detailed. The lines sharper, the trees more real. And always the same stick. Figures, always in front of the same green tent. The faces started changing too. The smiling ones grew faint. The scribbled black face appeared more often, sometimes twice, then 3 times. Until one day, all the figures had blacked out heads. Just shadows where eyes and mouths should be. Ethan began seeing things. Out the corner of his vision, a flash of green fabric in the trees behind the office. A small hand darting under a parked car. Once, he saw a drawing tacked to the break room bulletin board at work just for a second, but when he looked again, it was gone. Natalie started waking with nosebleeds. Sam kept his lights on every night, refusing to explain why. And Ethan stopped checking the glove box. The last time he had, the drawing showed a house that looked a lot like theirs. The front porch light was out. The door was open. Inside, the stick figures stood in a circle, heads bowed like they were waiting for something. They didn't call the cops. Who would believe them? 3 months later, Sam disappeared. Left work early, told his boss he wasn't feeling well, and never made it home. His car was found in the parking lot of Bastrop State Park. Unlocked. Empty. No signs of a struggle. The only thing left behind was a drawing on the dashboard. The same forest, the same tent, the same figures. Only now Sam's stick figure had been crossed out. Natalie broke down. She wanted to leave Texas. Leave the country if they could. Anywhere without pines or tents or old winding camp roads. Ethan agreed. He started planning. They booked tickets. To Oregon. The night before the flight, Ethan found the newest drawing slipped under their bedroom door. It was the cleanest one yet. Vibrant, perfectly symmetrical trees. Crisp lines. And the stick figures had names written under them. Sam, Ethan, Natalie, all crossed out. And under that, a new name in jagged red crayon. They didn't sleep that night. But it didn't matter. When they went outside at dawn to load the car, the tent was there, right beside the front porch. No seams, no zippers, just the same fabric. And a child's drawing pinned to the front flap with a stick. This one didn't show people. It showed an open door. And the black scribbled face waiting. Inside. It started just north of Laredo, deep into the long haul up I-35. Remen was riding shotgun, half awake, thumbing through the static on his phone while Louis kept the truck steady in the right lane, eyes gritty from too many hours, too much blacktop, and not enough rest. The night had the weight of wet cotton, that thick South Texas air pressing in on the cab like the world was holding its breath. They were somewhere past Cotulla, somewhere that looked like everything and nothing at once. Dark stretches of flat land, the occasional rest stop, and the vague glow of oil field rigs flickering like dying candles out in the distance. The CB radio hadn't worked properly in months. It was just there for show now, a relic mounted under the dash, hanging onto the ghost of usefulness. No one touched it. And Louis had even unplugged it weeks back after too many bursts of garbled trucker trash cut through the late-night silence. But tonight, it was on. The green LED was lit. No one remembered flipping the switch, and the static was steady, not the usual burst and crackle, but a smooth, low hiss, like something waiting to speak. Neither of them mentioned it at first. They both noticed. They both ignored it. Until 3:17 a.m., the static broke. Not loudly, not like a screech or a pop. Just a soft click, like a throat being cleared, and then a voice came through, not broadcasted, not called, just there. Almost home, Remen. The name dropped like a brick in Remen's chest. His blood felt like it iced over, turned to slush. He glanced at Louis, who slowed the truck just slightly. Neither spoke. The voice was male, slow, tired, but clean. Like a friend you forgot. You ever had. Like someone who used to talk to you from the other end of a long hallway at night. No identifiers, no location, no handle. Remen stared at the CB unit, then reached for it, not to answer, just to check. But the moment his fingers got close, the voice returned. No need to touch that. We're talking fine. Louis muttered, Jesus Christ, under his breath. The truck's headlights caught a shape up ahead, a dead armadillo split open. And twitching. Raymond didn't blink. You got family in Austin? The voice asked, still casual, still steady. Remen looked at Louis, then back at the radio. Yeah, he said, not sure why that the voice chuckled. Not anymore. Louis gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles cracked. Who is this? He barked. You think this is funny? The voice didn't respond. For a few miles, the static returned. The silence in the truck grew louder than any noise. Louis turned off the AC. Remen turned his phone face down in the Q folder. Outside, the highway stretched on, pale lines. Disappearing under their wheels, the world a blur of brush. Signs and nothingness. Then, again, the voice returned. You remember July 12th? The lake? When you dared him to swim out past the rocks? Raymond's stomach dropped. That was 15 years ago. Lake Belton. His cousin Omar. Drowned. Nobody found the body. Remen never told anyone about the dare. No one knew. No one could have known. Stop the truck. Remen whispered. Louis shook his head. Nope, not here. Not now. The CB crackled again. He called for you, you know, while he was going under. He thought you'd swim out. He waited. Remen leaned forward and yanked the cord from the back of the unit. The lights stayed on. The static didn't change. The voice kept talking. It's always been like this. One long road. One long ride. You think you're headed somewhere, but you're just circling. The next rest stop sign said 12 miles. Louis floored it. Get that thing out of the truck, he said, sweating now. Remen grabbed the unit, yanked it, wires and all. It didn't fight him, didn't spark or scream. He threw it in the back. It kept talking. From the sleeper bunk. From under the seats. From the vents. The same voice. Almost home. Remen. The rest stop came into view. One of those old 70s style ones with peeling paint and busted vending machines. They skidded in too fast, parked diagonally, jumped out. The night was loud with insects. The occasional hiss of an engine cooling down. No other vehicles. But the lights in the restroom building were on, and music was playing inside. Something old. Something broken, cassette-like. Like a lullaby from Alibi from Amhanfen Broken. Cassette-like a lullaby from something broken. An AM station that hadn't existed in 30 years. They stepped closer. The music stopped. Remen felt something tug in his gut. A fear so old and rooted it felt ancestral. The door to the men's room creaked open. Just an inch. A voice whispered from inside. Truck still running. Louis turned. The truck was idling. Neither of them had keys in hand. Then came the real horror. The passenger door opened on its own. Slow, deliberate. A shape climbed out. Too tall, too thin. Wearing clothes Riemann hadn't seen since childhood. A hoodie with the logo of his old middle school. Shoes too small. Wet footprints where there should be dust. Louis ran back to the truck, yanked open the driver's side, reached in for the emergency flashlight. Riemann didn't move. The figure stood in front of him now, just a few feet away. No face, just a shimmer. Like looking at something through heat waves. But the voice came again, from that shimmer. You left me. Now you take my place. A hand reached out, fingers too long, bones too loud. Riemann's mouth moved, but nothing came out. The hand touched his chest, and suddenly he was standing inside. The truck. Alone. The CB unit was wired back and Louis was gone. Outside, nothing moved. Not the trees. Not the bugs. Not the air. Riemann reached for the door. It wouldn't open. The CB crackled. Almost home, Louis. The voice had changed. It knew. Another name now.